Before I announce today's guest, a couple of quick housekeeping notes. We recorded some audio at Alcor's 50th anniversary conference that I'm sure folks are interested in hearing. We don't yet have access to that audio, but when we do, we will release that episode for your consumption. And in case you don't realize it, we are now each of these episodes is now being released as both video and the audio podcast. So you'll find a link down below, whether you're listening to the audio or the video, if you want to switch to the other one. But we are going to be doing it this way for the foreseeable future. So now I'm going to introduce today's guest. His name is Kai Micah Mills. He's the founder of Cryopets, and he's spent the last decade as a serial entrepreneur in the tech space. He's a big fan of hats, and he loves pets, and he's a cryonicist. And you'll get to hear a very good conversation with him that we have coming up. It is a bit long, but every moment of it is interesting. You won't regret listening to it the whole way through. This is a great way to get to know somebody who we believe, after having spoken to him, will definitively have an impact on the cryonics industry. So without further ado, we now present to you Kai Micah Mills. Kai Micah Mills, welcome to the Cryonics Underground podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
So tell us first, before we get into Cryopets and everything else, where are you located? Where did you grow up? And is it the same place where you're gonna be starting this company?
Yeah, so I actually grew up in Frederick, Maryland.
Okay.
It's a town sort of outside of Baltimore. And I ended up moving to Utah when I was 13, about 12 or 13. And I spent a little time in Seattle for my last startup, but for the most part, I've been in Utah for the past 10 years. And yeah, so this is where Cryopets is going to be based, Salt Lake City area. It's I think it's the fourth safest city in the U.S. From natural disasters, and it's also just very, very low on crime, and it's a very, very solid location for any building that you want to last a long time. This would be a good place to put it.
And so you mentioned your prior experiences starting some tech companies like the one you did when you were in Seattle and such. Can you tell us about those experiences?
Yeah, I mean that goes pretty far back. I didn't really start when I was younger. So I grew up very religious. Hence moving to Utah. My family is Mormon, which you can probably guess by the Utah. I mean, it's a pretty good population here of people who are Mormon in the state. And that was one of the reasons that we moved to Utah, and also my father's family was here. And at the time, I was very, very religious. I grew up religious, and I'm the kind of guy where I fully apply myself to whatever I'm doing, right? When I was young, whether that was sports or school or whatever, right? Like if I'm spending my time on it, I'm gonna apply myself. And so religion was one of those things. I mean, I was very into it. I read the Bible cover to cover, the Book of Mormon cover to cover. I would bring them to school and try to teach other kids about stuff. I was like a little missionary at the time, and so yeah, I was very religious, and I guess when you turn like 12 or 13, I feel like you really start thinking for the first time. I don't know. I feel like before that we have like much less impressive consciousness, and like when you reach that age, you start kind of questioning things, or at least that was the age that I started to. And people would always tell me about these amazing experiences they had when they would read whatever religious text, right? They had these almost epiphanies about it being true and about God being real and all these things. And I never had that. I remember it was yeah, I was 12 or 13, and my dad would always tell me about these experiences that he had, and I never had any myself. And I started to, after a while, I started to think like, the whole basis behind religion is, in most religions, it's faith, right? You you really have to believe, and this is kind of a precursor to why I even started making tech companies in the first place. So you'll have to bear with me for a moment, but yeah, I think yeah, I didn't know why I didn't have that magical experience that other people had. And um, I remember my father also told me about these experiences that he had kind of on the other end of the table that were more um, demonic, if you will, right? And just experiences that he had with like spirits, or just these experiences where, like, if you had one of those, you'd be like, okay, damn, I'm a believer, right? Like, absolutely, this makes a lot of sense now. And I was like, I wish I could have one of these experiences. I mean, then I would absolutely be a believer. And so I figured at the time, whether it was a smart idea or not, as a 13-year-old, I was like, I'm going to try to have one of these experiences with the other side, right? Not with the God side, but the the worst side of that spectrum, right? And I tried. I mean, I tried everything. I mean, you name it. Everything from Ouija boards to spells, rituals. I did a blood sacrifice on me, not on anyone else, but you know, and just nothing ever happened. Nothing ever didn't have any kind of experience. And it was, it was depressing. It was like it was disappointing when you give so much of yourself to something, and it just turns out not to be real, right?
But so a lot of people that want to have those kinds of experiences end up resorting to mind-altering substances of one sort or another,
Yeah.
which is, of course, particularly difficult coming from a Mormon perspective. Would you say that those were just off the table, or do you feel like if you had done that, the experience wouldn't have been authentic in some way?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. The latter there. I mean, people will get high and then say that they experienced some sort of alternate plane. I mean, it's completely ridiculous, right? I had no interest in sort of giving myself almost like false hope like that. I mean, you can imagine whatever you want to imagine. So yeah, I mean, that was off the table, and I've always been very anti-substance for everything from drugs, alcohol, everything. I mean, um, so yeah, never really went down that path, but yeah, that's always been a little ridiculous to me. But
What would you say of somebody who says, well, the problem, Kai, is that, see, these substances, what they do is they open the gates, they unhinder, they stop your terrestrial, the parts of your brain that are not truly spiritual and connected to what's beyond. They stop them from controlling and hindering your ability to experience, the all those deeper things in existence. So that's why you should have, taken something and then use that to release yourself from the hold that this reality has on you. Not
yeah,
convincing, or
I mean, no, but I can see, where that argument comes from. I mean, when it comes to drugs, we have like a pretty good grasp on what they do to the mind, what areas of the mind that they impact. The brain is a very physical object, so it's the results that we get from them are not surprising in any way. So yeah, look, maybe I'll go do LSD in the in the desert sometime, but I'm not convinced as of now. So maybe. But anyway, back to your main question, right? I Yeah, I got to the point where it was very depressing that I got to the point where yeah, I felt like there was nothing more out there, at least nothing that was going to save us and give us eternal life as long as we go to church every Sunday, right? And it was around this time that I ended up finding the 2045 initiative. And that was a project by the Russian billionaire Dmitry Itskov, who wanted to make humanity immortal by 2045. And I just thought it was like the coolest thing I've ever seen at the time, because
And how old were you at this time? Like,
I think I was 13.
okay.
Over 13. And yeah, I mean, basically, if we could accomplish all those things that I was promised through religion, right? Eternal life, even becoming like a god one day. These things were all still very attractive to me. They were things that I still wanted, things that, made up who I was. But if we could do those through science instead of faith in a very tangible way, I think that's really what hooked me. And I remember watching like one of his like interviews with Dimitri, and I think at the end of the interview, he was talking about, they asked him how long he wants to live, and he was like, I don't know, 1,000 years, 1,000,000 years, but he was like, I just want to live. And it was just very powerful for me at the time, and it really stuck with me, and that's sort of what made me realize, like, this is what I want to dedicate my life to. This is pretty much all that matters. If we cease to exist, then nothing else matters anyway. So we have to make it last forever, right?
It's interesting that it happened to you at that age. I think for most people who end up wanting to be able to live long, indefinite lifespans, it probably happens later, because only later do you kind of think about the fact that you are going to die and the full implications of what that means, and the fact, and coming from a religious background, I think you not only thought about that, but you thought, oh, I could also get eternal life if I play my cards right. Then when you stop being religious, or when that faded, or then you said, wait, I still want that eternal life thing or something like it, but maybe there's still a way to get it, even though the original way that I thought I would be able to get this is not going to work. But I think a lot of people who don't have that religious background and such don't go through those contemplative steps at that age.
Yeah, I mean, religion is about death, right? I mean, it's what comes after. What else is there other than just this life? And so I think, yeah, it's sort of at the top of your mind. You're always thinking about, oh, I can't do that because I might lose out on my afterlife, right? And when I got to the point where I was like, okay, there is no afterlife, then yeah, I mean, it just made me think about it more, because I was like, wow, I mean, we're just gonna die here. Like, we have to do something about this. Yeah.
And was there, aside from your kind of religious spiritual quest of, the light and the dark side of it, was there some life event aside from that kind of vaulted you into this mindset, a death in the family, anything particular, or did you just kind of slowly bleed into this idea of wanting to live forever or indefinitely?
No, yeah. So, I mean, it was a pretty, it was a complicated year. I think that was like 2012 or something around then, 2011, 2012. And that was the year that we moved to Utah. So it was the first time I ever moved, which was very intense for me. I didn't know anyone in the state, new school, all that. And then my parents also got divorced the same year. So it was a lot of, and I think the biggest factor was really just how much time I had alone. Everyone was kind of off coping in their own ways, and I just had like a really overwhelming amount of time to myself. And I think that isolation kind of, it really makes you start to question like who you are, what you're not sort of just a collection of the people around you anymore. You start to really realize who you are, and ask questions about who you want to be. I think a lot of people actually really don't get to experience that. I think I think everyone should go through, a period, however long, but, a period of isolation to really figure out who they are without, the pressure and without the opinions of everyone else around them. They say, you are who you hang with, right? So if you only hang with yourself, I mean, I think it's a really good way to figure out who you are. So yeah, I think that was the biggest factor for me. I just had so much time alone, and I started to really figure out who I was and who I wanted to be. And yeah, that's where I came to that conclusion. And I mean, at this age, my parents didn't have any kind of money to help me like jump into entrepreneurship or start to tackle some of these problems. So I mean, if you want to create like a SENS research foundation, right? Like you can't be 12 years old and broke. Like it's very difficult. So I just kind of started with what I was good at naturally. I spent a lot of time playing video games, loved video games growing up. At the time I was spending a lot of time on Minecraft and World of Warcraft and, a few others, and virtual worlds were always very entertaining to me. And those games, you kind of learn how to hack them and put your own software, your own plugins into the game. And, so I sort of started to learn how to code and learn how to just do a lot of stuff on computers. So that's kind of what the catalyst was for me entering the tech world. I figured if I could have enough success building companies and, making money, becoming resourceful, getting connections, all of that, then, eventually I'd be able to take on something that was, my own 2045 initiative, right? So yeah, that's what I started with, and that's sort of where I started with the tech companies. And my first, company, if you can even call it that, was just a Minecraft server, right? Minecraft was a goldmine at the time. You could start a Minecraft server, and kids would come and join, and you could advertise it, and then you would sell these sort of ranks on the server, and they would give the people more access, whether it's to mini games or cosmetics or whatever. And it got to the point where pretty quickly, I would say like 3 months in, I was making more money than my parents combined. It was just a really crazy kind of fast success. And yeah, that's that mixed with sort of this big experience I had. I knew I wanted to work on this life extension stuff eventually. I knew I wanted to dedicate my life to something greater. And yeah, all that together, I couldn't focus on school anymore. I ended up dropping out of high school just a few weeks or a few months into my first year of high school. So yeah, I remember I just stopped going. I stopped showing up, and I think it actually took my parents a little while to realize that I wasn't going. And I think they ended up getting like a letter from the school or something like, hey, your kid hasn't showed up in a very long time. And all my grades were Fs, I was just dropping everything. And I ended up showing my dad my Minecraft server. I was like, I'm making all this money. I want to do all this instead. And I think if they weren't going through the divorce, they probably would have said, hell no, like you need to stay in school. But I think at that point, everyone was just pretty exhausted. And I think they were probably like, all right, whatever, looks like you're figuring it out a little bit. So might as well let you drop out into this.
Yeah. You got the advantage of divide and conquer.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, no, it worked out in my favor. And I just always knew I wanted to keep working my way up in the tech industry. I mean, Minecraft servers, okay, it was making me good money, but it's like, it's a game, right? It's not impacting anything on a great scale. I went from running Minecraft servers to actually hosting them. I met this Israeli guy on one of my Minecraft servers. He was like 40 or something. He's this 40-year-old guy, and he was like very, very strong accent. He was like, Kai, we must do hosting. Hosting is where the money is at. I was like, Okay, why not? And so he was kind of like the advertising guy. I was the tech guy. I developed the whole site and everything. We ended up hosting Minecraft servers. So kids would come to us to purchase a server and host it. And within, I think, 5 or 6 months, we were one of the largest Minecraft server hosts in the world. And it was a big deal at the time, because these were like, Minecraft was a huge game, still is a huge game. We had thousands and thousands of customers all over the world. And I think I was maybe I was 15 at this point when we started this, and it was like my really big first experience with managing customers, managing payroll. I think we had somewhere like 8 or so paid employees. It was just a really great learning experience, and I made an unbelievable amount of mistakes, and but it was a really powerful learning experience. And that was actually the first company I sold. I think I was 16 when we ended up selling it. And so that was kind of my first big win in tech, and my first kind of taste at like a real company, not just like a Minecraft server. Even though it's still Minecraft, it was very much real.
So, but before Kai, before you go, tell us about the subsequent to that. I wanted to go back for a moment to the fact that in high school you just freshman year you were like peace out, I got better things to do. Do you feel like you missed out on something? Like, no, I don't just mean like fun and the stuff you see like in the movies, but something usefully formative about high school that you either realized later and had to catch up on, or you're like, yeah, I missed out on it, whatever, it's not pivotal or something.
Yeah, I think so. I've obviously never regretted it, right? To start. There were things, and yeah, some of those fun things, like I wish I could have gotten to take a girl to a school dance, right? I think that would have been a cool experience to have. I never got that, right? I had practically no social experiences throughout my entire high school age, right? I wasn't at high school long enough, or at school long enough in Utah to even meet anyone. So I just didn't even know anyone in the state, right? So there's the isolation and being away from school and all that. It had an incredible amount of good side effects. I talked a lot about isolation, how I think that builds you. I think high school comes with a lot of peer pressures. People start making dumb decisions. But yeah, it definitely comes with some negative side effects as well. Coming out of that, later on, when I was really like 19 or so before I started re-entering the world, if you will, right? And I was very just socially, not experienced in any way, right? With tech companies, you sit behind the laptop and you can just code all day and you can make a ton of money. And I would talk to customers and things like that, but still, like, socially in real life, I was very, very behind on that. So that was one of the negative side effects. But as far as like other high school experiences, what I did during those years was much more formative, in my opinion, as far as the areas of myself that I wanted to work on, right? I can do without the social stuff, but I learned how to work 20 plus hours a day, every day, building companies, and really kind of almost beating my mind into submission when it comes to just executing and getting things done and accomplishing things. I think that was a lot more valuable than anything high school would have offered me. And of course, the education in high school is a joke, right? So that's not even worth mentioning. It's like,
typically, there are exceptions, but
sure,
yeah, typically, yeah.
Absolutely. But typically, majority of what they teach is just useless, so it's, yeah, I'm glad I didn't, I'm glad I had that time. Another thing as well is, like, a lot of people just get trapped in life. You get out of high school, right? you're whatever, almost 18 years old or 18 years old. If you go to college, then you go straight off to college, or you have to get a job and move out, right? Your parents are kicking you out, and you have to start paying bills. And so you go straight from this education where you're doing it, 9 to 5 to your work where you're doing it 9 to 5, and you almost like never get a second to just breathe and figure out like what you actually want to do, what you want to accomplish. And you never get enough time to really apply yourself to anything other than that set path. And not going to high school gave me 4 years, or if you count not going to college, 8 years plus of really just freedom to think about what I wanted to, and to really like craft what future I wanted. And so yeah, I think I definitely wouldn't go back and go to high school. And if I have a kid, they won't go to high school either. So but yeah.
You sound like a poster child for this fund called 1517 with Mike Gibson and Danielle.
Yeah, I've talked to Danielle a lot, actually. She's been following along with the Cryopet stuff a little bit. So maybe I'll win them over sometime when they realize that it's not well, it is crazy, but
it's the good kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if there was ever a shoo-in for 1517, it sounds like, the more success from you would sort of prove their point about the how negative or inefficient or ineffective or whatever traditional schooling is, especially at that point.
Yeah. Child labor is good. So,
yeah.
Shifting into kind of your initial interest in cryonics, aside from the 2045 project, what was your really first official introduction to the industry of cryonics? So when do you remember really hearing about it, and who influenced you there?
Yeah, I don't think the 2045 initiative had a lot of focus on it. I think they mostly wanted to create like these avatars of people, which were basically like sort of these synthetic bodies, and then we would upload our mind eventually into those bodies. So I don't think they ever had a big focus on cryonics. I think I might have heard of it at the time, but I wasn't very in depth with it. I think it was I can't remember exactly when I learned about it the first time, but I remember I visited Alcor in 2016. I was in Arizona for an event. I might have been 16 or 17 years old at the time, and I ended up stopping by, and they gave me a tour, let me walk around and see the doers and everything. So it was really cool. I think that was my main sort of introduction to the space, and but it wasn't until a few years after that where I started to take it a bit more seriously.
Okay.
Before we get too far into Cryonics, Kai, I did want to go back and ask you about the other company that you started after the Minecraft hosting company, and sort of taking you to closer to where closer to today.
Yeah, so there were quite a few. After the Minecraft hosting company, I figured I had a knack for hosting, and of course this is all pre AWS or like Vercel, or like, I mean, you would go to HostGator, or you would go to like name.com to host your website and pay for web hosting. This is before that monopoly really took over, and so there was still like the hosting industry was still very fragmented. There was a lot of opportunity, and so I was still in the game space, but I did hosting for like I think like 30 different games. So we just kind of scaled up. It was a company called Detifire, and we did hosting for like 30 different video games, and then we would provide the software and the control panel and all that, and then we also sold some dedicated servers and some VPSs, and some other cloud services, just try to take it to the next level.
Were you actually running the hardware itself, or was all this a layer on top?
No, so we would co-locate with a data center where you basically buy like a rack, and so technically you own the rack of servers, but they manage them and they keep them in their data center.
Yeah.
And then we would just install the software on top, and then people would come and they'd pay monthly for the service that we're providing. And yeah, so that was it went pretty well. That was actually the second company that I ended up selling. So it was in a pretty short period of I would say maybe like 2 years where I sold those companies back to back. And I think after that company I was 17, something in that range. I did a bunch of other projects, some other hosting companies. We had one where we focused on VPSs, and ended up, it was like a merger deal, just some smaller things. But
and what kind of companies were doing the acquisitions here? Were they big players, or with companies we wouldn't have heard of? Or
yeah, with the Minecraft server one, it was just one of the larger Minecraft server providers that bought us. So they were essentially just buying the customers. And then with the Dedify one, the hosting company it was a pretty large like CSGO gaming organization at the time that ended up buying it. So they're actually ended up, after I sold it, they ended up making the brand into kind of a popular sort of esports tournament kind of thing, mostly focusing around CSGO. But no, I mean, it wasn't Google or Microsoft that was buying these companies. They were 5 and 6 figure acquisitions. It wasn't multi-million-dollar deals, right? Game servers, you could have a lot of customers, but it was still very saturated. The margins were very shit, and you have to keep in mind you're selling to kids who are like asking their parents for their credit card so they can spend like $3. You know what I mean? Like, you can't really charge like a premium in this area. So, the income wasn't like unbelievable, right? And but still, I mean, as a teenager, like, those acquisitions were still a big deal, and it helped me get to the next steps, right? So I think after that company is when I sort of found the Web3 space. They called it the decentralized web at the time. I think I bought some cryptocurrency back in like 2017. I think like a couple months before that huge run happened. And I went from I threw like $300 in and was trading and messing around with it. And I think by that December, I turned it into like $40,000. And I was like, what the hell is going on? I was doing the math. I was like, if it keeps up at this rate, like, I'm going to be a billionaire. So that's not going to happen. So like, this is not going to last. You know what I mean? Like, something's not going to work here. And of course it didn't, and it crashed like that month, I think. And then I think I lost like most of the 40,000. So it was just kind of like this crazy little run, but the tech was very interesting, right? Especially as someone who came from a hosting background, a centralized hosting background. It was very interesting to me when it came to like the aspects of hosting in a decentralized, like, peer-to-peer way. So things like IPFS were very interesting to me. And I ended up making this company that was like a decentralized website builder. So it was like Wix. You put the website together, but then it would basically host on a peer-to-peer network. And basically the people who wanted to host their website could turn their computer into a node, and then they would get paid for running that node, and they would host encrypted websites. So yeah, it was just kind of like a web hosting, just built on top of IPFS. And I think this was 2018 at the time. So it was still very, very early in crypto, and raised a little bit of money, did a little friends and family round. But we couldn't get product market fit because it was so early. I realized that people don't really care about their privacy as much as I thought they did. Facebook selling all your data, and like, no one actually really cares. You know what I mean? Like, they'll complain about it, but like, they're not going to switch to another service specifically just for privacy, at least not yet. And it's certainly not at that time. So even though it was one of my, I would say, like, software wise, one of the favorite things that I ever developed. It was so cool how in a regular hosting environment, the more traffic you get to your website, the slower it gets, right? Because the server starts getting overwhelmed. But in a peer-to-peer network, the more traffic you get to your website, the more people who are seeding it, actually the faster it gets, right? So it was just, I really thought it was incredible and could have worked, but yeah, it was a dud. And that was kind of my first big failure as far as a startup goes. Because I spent, a pretty considerable amount of time on it. It just didn't work out.
Do you feel like you learned more from the failure of this than you had from your successes prior? A lot of entrepreneurs, myself included, realize that we learn more from failure than from success many times.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely, 100%. Because you try so much more, right? Because you're failing. It's not like, oh, the first thing or the second thing worked. You go through 100 things and you've learned a shit ton, but it's still not going anywhere, right? So yeah, I mean, it was a really great learning experience. It was also kind of the first company that I started going to a lot of events for. So I got to go to like Decentralized Web Summit and a lot of ones in San Francisco, and got to meet a lot of cool people. Tim Berners-Lee, who made the World Wide Web, and just kind of got to meet a lot of the guys who built the internet, right? Which was really awesome. But yeah, no, it didn't end up panning out. And so, between all these companies, I had side projects and this and that. And after that company, I needed to get my footing a little bit. I ended up starting a web development company. And we ended up becoming, one of the top rated on Upwork. So just doing like React development mostly. And it was a way to just get my footing, get a bunch of cash together to figure out what the next thing was. And it was around that time, maybe it was the end of 2019, when I received a message from sort of this guy that I knew about for a while, who was also in the Minecraft space, Dayton Mills. He also sold a Minecraft project sort of around the same time I did as a kid. And he had like a plugin for servers where it was almost like the Google Analytics for Minecraft. You can figure out like why your player base was churning and like who was coming in and all that, right? And we knew about each other over the years. We said things back and forth, but we were kind of looking at our past, and we were like, we both went from Minecraft to Web3 to, we both had these successes. Like, we should work on something together, right? And we ended up, this was right before the pandemic, and we both worked remotely our entire lives. And so we kind of wanted to put something together for remote work, but also mix our gaming background in there. And we kind of came up with this like 2D office where people could walk around it as they get closer to other people. They could hear those people. So it was like a proximity chat, almost like 2D video game. And we ended up raising 1.6 million for it, from a lot of actually like really crazy big investors, from Naval, from Sawhill, Homebrew. Quite a really cool list, because of course, like right after we started this, the pandemic hit, and that whole remote work kind of craze started happening. So the timing was just excellent. It was really, really excellent for us. And now to date, that company, which was called Branch, has raised over 14 million, is continuing to do incredibly well, huge community around it. The remote work thing kind of fell off as like, I don't know. It's kind of a fight between people who still want to do remote work and people who want to go back to the office. And but as far as what we were seeing from the numbers, like people just weren't buying it. They weren't. In fact, most people would come in and they would just play with it like a game. And they'd be like, okay, we got to get back to work, so let's X out of it because it's too fun. You know what I mean? Like they would just be distracted. So we're like, all right, let's just make it a game then. And Branch ended up pivoting to sort of like a Web3 kind of game studio, and then raised all that money. And yeah, I think it was just a culmination of all those things. It was, I mean, that was my first like very huge win.
When were you involved, or what was your involvement with that company? Are you still involved in some way with that company?
No, so I left the company last year around May. I think it was around May of last year. So I was at the company for a year, and yeah, I mean, Dave, my co-founder, he's a genius. Our CTO was actually he was the first guy that I made my first Minecraft server with back in the day. So we kind of stuck together over the years, and yeah, no, it just got to the point where I felt like I did what I needed to get the company to that point, and it also kind of set me up in a position where I finally had all those resources that I needed to work on what I've been, aching and itching to work on for a decade now. So all of that together it was about 10 years. And so, yeah, no, it was time. It was a, mutual decision by all of us. And that's when I left and started figuring out what I wanted to do in the life extension space. So that's the journey in tech for 10 years.
Now, before we jump head on into cryopets, what, or more so, why did you decide to focus on cryonics specifically and not some other aspect of life extension like longevity? I had heard in a previous conversation you had mentioned a tech tree you had done, which I thought was actually quite interesting, and I thought it was really persuasive. It was a really persuasive exercise, especially if you were a younger person who was at some type of crossroads of trying to decide where you were going to focus your efforts. So could you tell us a little bit about how you got inspired to do that exercise, and walk us through the process of what you went through and some of the conclusions you drew from that?
Yeah, for sure. So I think I left that company in May, and I think it was around like the month after that, I was really, yeah, I stayed up to date in the industry, just all the life extension areas, everything from cryonics to the aging field to, mind uploading, just what everyone was working on over the years. But yeah, I had to sort of, get up to date on the specifics of what has been accomplished, and really just finding out where I would have the most impact, and also what is the most important thing to work on. Because the fact of the matter is, like, if you choose the wrong thing, you die. Like this isn't a joke. I mean, we're all betting our lives on whatever we choose to put our time into. And if I choose the wrong thing, then I spend my life going in the completely wrong direction, and I'm dead. And not only that, but my parents have less time than I do. My cat has less time than I do, right? So there's a lot of factors at play there. And so yeah, I think I saw that Balaji tweet about sort of Civ 6 tech trees, and how we need these for, for like real industries, to sort of map out what comes next. And I love that idea. And I ended up putting together a tech tree. It's actually live. It's on, I have it on antimortality.com. It's a draft. It's not something that I put like, I didn't get too into detail. I mostly just stuck with like the overarching things that need to be accomplished in order to achieve immortality, right? And so I separated it into 3 columns, which were prevention, extension, and ascension. It was very important that they rhymed, right? Because that makes it very cool. So prevention is like cryonics aspects, preventing death, biostasis, right? Extension would be the life extension stuff, curing aging. And then ascension was kind of the AI, mind uploading, BCI type stuff. And just sort of, yeah, just mapped out the main milestones that we would have to hit in each of those columns, and which companies were working on what parts of those columns. And what I found when I was putting this together is that the entire cryopreservation column was so empty. Like there were like, there's organizations, there's researchers, but there wasn't any like really big companies. There wasn't, there's practically no funding in the space. And probably worst of all, it's wasn't even taken seriously. Like I thought by this point, like Cryonics has been around for what, 50 years now. And especially like seeing this many, many years ago, and to this point, I thought, you know, people would be taking it seriously by now, because like I said, it's an entire column. It's 1/3 of this. It's massive. Like this isn't just like one tiny little aspect of how we might be able to accomplish this. It's necessary that we do this. So it was very shocking that people weren't understanding that. And I quickly sort of understood that that was where I was needed the most, just because it was an industry that needed the help the most out of all of them. But I mean, that's not the only reason that I decided to work on cryonics. I mean, there's a slew of reasons. The life extension field has produced absolutely no exciting results to date. I mean, we haven't even defined what aging is in a way that practically anyone can agree on. So it's in such an early stage, and it's also one of those fields where it's going to take an entire industry that is magnitudes larger than it is now to actually accomplish that. Whereas I'm pretty confident that the cryopreservation problem, I mean, cryopreserving organs that are a little larger than we have in the past and reducing some toxicity damage. And I mean, these are not like, we don't have to understand the entire human body to do this, right? And it can also, you know, translate directly from model organisms to humans, right? Aside from scale, I mean, you know, a liver is a liver, right? So it just made so much sense to focus on this field, because I didn't have to count on an entire industry of people making the right decisions and succeeding to save my life. I don't trust people that much. I just don't. I don't think people are that capable. And the fact that, you know, so much effort has gone into it already, and we have nothing to show for it. I mean, biology is really, really difficult, right? So I don't see us hitting longevity escape velocity in our lifetimes. I think, you know, maybe we'll be able to. Yeah, I mean, I just think some of the predictions are absolutely insane. I mean, it takes, the average clinical trial is, or just getting a drug to market is what, like 10 to 20 years. And that's a drug that the FDA actually already takes seriously and is willing to accept, which as far as aging, the FDA still doesn't take it seriously, which is why a lot of the aging companies have to focus on basically disguising themselves as like a cancer drug or a diabetes drug, right? And so, yeah, I mean, even to get it in the next 20 years, that would mean in the next couple years, we would have to have something in the pipeline that has enough lifespan extension to help us reach longevity escape velocity. And we just have nothing like that. If I had to put my money on one approach, I would still put it on Aubrey de Grey's approach, you know, the SENS approach to aging, but it still hasn't been proven in mice. It still hasn't been accomplished in mice. So it's not something that is going to happen anytime soon. It's not something that's in the pipeline and ready to go to human trials. And I mean, other than that, I mean, there's yeah, I mean, we're still just in such early stages there that it just, yeah, I can't bet my life on it, and I can't bet my parents' lives on it, who are, you know, almost 60 now, and certainly not my cat's life on it, who has like a couple more years to live, right?
So this is getting a little bit far afield, Kai, but why do you think, and I'm in complete agreement with you. I suspect a lot of people in the cryonics community are in complete agreement. It's part of the reason why we're doing this, and not just, you know, waiting around for those life extension therapies to come through. But why aren't more people who are excited about life extension kind of buying this argument, right? Like take, for example, you mentioned Aubrey de Grey. Aubrey obviously is connected with Alcor. I believe he's of course signed up. Yet he spends the majority of his time, effort, public speaking, etc., ignoring cryonics. When it's brought up, he'll have positive things to say, but it's kind of like Well, of course, we're going to get to life extension, but yeah, I guess if you're at risk of dying very, very, very soon, okay, that's what cryonics is for. And that just sounds completely backwards to me. Why do you have any ideas as to why the life extension community is like this?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons. I think dying is scary. I mean, I'm not saying that's like the Aubrey de Grey's reason or anything, but I think for a lot of people, like, death is really scary, and cryonics requires temporary death. So in general, people are going to put that in a place where it's like, okay, that's plan B. Plan A is obviously to not die in the first place. I think that's like a very popular mindset that people get into. And yeah, I mean, this is something that, Aubrey has been working on for a very, very long time. A lot of people in that field have been working on it for a long time. I think they have a lot invested in it. I think Aubrey said before that, I think his biggest miscalculation was just being able to get all the money that he needed to for this, and that the money didn't come as easily as he expected it to. And I think now they see, the rejuvenation biotechnology field growing, and it's getting obviously quite a bit of attention. We have Evolution, we have Altos Labs, and then all the new startups, and there's like actually real funding in the space, which is, I can see how that would create hope. At the same time, very, very few of these projects are focused on lifespan. The vast majority are still focused on health span because it's still taboo to focus on lifespan. And yeah, very, very few of them are taking any kind of radical approach, right? There's still a giant focus on like small molecule drugs. And it's like, what are we going to do? Spend the next 20 years getting a drug that gets us 10 years of health span, not even lifespan? It's just a complete waste of time. Like it's going to take radical interventions to save us here, right? And from my point of view, none of those are really being done. The only subfield of the aging space, or really just the life extension space, that I'm interested in, and well, I'm interested in all of them, but that I'm a little more bullish on in our lifetime is the replacement work with Jean Hebert, and working on replacing small portions of brain tissue with new constructed brain tissue that heals the surrounding brain tissue. And then practically we can replace the rest of the human body. So I think replacement work is feasible, because it's basically just Jean Hebert's work mixed with some new surgical breakthroughs, which I think is possible in our lifetimes. Now, doing like a head transplant or a brain transplant is another one of those things that's like very scary to people. And it comes off as very radical, but it's actually like a much more conservative approach, because it's like actually doable in our lifespan. And I don't know, a lot of people want radical life extension without a radical approach. They want 100 more years of life by taking a pill, and it's just not going to happen. It's impossible. We're not going to see that. So it's yeah, I don't know the best way to convince the entire life extension community to switch over to cryonics, but I really don't think we need to, because both communities are so small as it is. We shouldn't need to have to like leech people from the aging field in order to jump into aging, or to jump into cryonics. We just need more people altogether.
I would agree, but I would say that the anti-aging field is, I would imagine, I'm going to guess here, like 10 to 100 times bigger than the cryonic space in terms of funding, in terms of people involved, public attention, somewhere between 10 and 100 times. So if you and I are correct about the fact that cryonics really should be, where the majority of resources, time and effort, and people should be investing their time, and there's a limited pool of people that seem to care enough about this, then, moving half of those people currently involved in longevity into cryonics, I think would be a huge win.
Yeah, no, it absolutely would. It's kind of one of those things, because the longevity field is necessary for cryonics. No one wants to get cryopreserved at 90 and then revived at 90, right? Like we're going to need rejuvenation technology for revival. So these things do have to be worked on. They both have to exist, right? I mean, for what it's worth, and I won't like name names because I'm not sure who's comfortable publicly with this being known, but a lot of the prominent researchers in the aging field are switching over to cryonics. I mean, very prominent ones. So I would, we're going to see a lot more of that naturally over the next 5 to 10 years, because another 10 years is going to pass and we're not going to have an intervention for aging. There's no way. It's impossible because nothing's in human trials right now. So, I mean, unless like some crazy breakthrough happens, which is possible, don't get me wrong, just not probable. Unless some crazy breakthrough happens, then yeah, people are going to keep flooding in. I mean, it's one of those things too, where like, there's so many causes of death outside of aging, right? I mean, environmental, disease, another COVID-19 in 20 years, luckily I live in a safe neighborhood, but man, sometimes when I walk around San Francisco at these events, I'm like, I really wish Cryonics.
Gotta be careful.
Because it's, I mean, there's so many causes of death. And when you're living an extended lifespan, like those probabilities are going to catch up with you. They are at some point. You can't, I mean, unless you're in a padded room, for eternity, which would still find a way to kill you somehow. You get a blood clot or something, right? Like, it's just, you can't run from that forever. So I truly believe that everyone alive is going to need to go into a form of biostasis at some point in the future, regardless of us curing aging or not. So it's necessary. This isn't and this is one of the things I've mentioned before, is like, I was at the Foresight conference, and of course everyone's mostly like life extension people. And
yeah.
I think I got up on stage and I was like, you guys are insane for not focusing on cryonics, I did the whole spiel. And yeah, I mean, it's just, people call it plan A because they think if we cure aging, they're never going to have to die. They're never going to go into they're never going to have to go into cryostasis. It's just not the case, right? Like, probability will catch up with you. Something is going to kill you eventually, unless you, like I said, are completely not even living. And we need to have that in place for that to happen. So, I mean, it's not a plan B, because that's almost, you're basically saying that we're not going to need it if plan A works. That's just,
it's almost like you're saying it's an afterthought. It's a backup for whatever, whereas for the average person, cryonics should be the first thing and the primary thing that they think about. And sure, if by some miracle life extension does happen to materialize prior to needing cryonics, great, obviously that's wonderful. But that's the kind of thing that you just sort of, it'll happen one way or another, sure, aside from like a handful of billionaires that might actually be able to change the outcome, but it'll happen one way or another. Whereas cryonics will not, to you, it will not happen unless you take active steps to make it happen, to set yourself up for it, or set your pets up for it, or set your family members up for it. And so that's why you're the whole calling cryonics plan B and life extension plan A seems completely backwards to me.
Right. Yeah. I mean, on the bright side, I mentioned it earlier. I truly believe like one large company can solve the majority of problems in cryonics. It's a much, much easier problem to solve than aging. By magnitudes easier. So
I think if cryonics had the kind of funding that life extension has right now, I think we can get to sort of almost perfect cryopreservation in the next what would you say, 10 years, something, 20 years?
Absolutely. And if we're talking 20 years, we could probably have almost completely innately reversible cryopreservation of whole bodies. I mean the brain is obviously, the brain is one of the huge milestones there, right? After we get that done, I mean, the body has an incredible delivery mechanism. There's really only like certain types of tissue that aren't cryopreserved as well. I mean, the problems aren't insane at that point.
I think if we get to the point of saying that, look, if you take this tissue and you look at it under the strongest electron microscopes, et cetera, it looks flawless. I mean, it looks like the moment that it was the moment prior to being cryopreserved looks just like that, or as close to that as reasonable. I think the other problem of, how do we now reverse this, is so wonderful, because you can push that problem off by 100 years or a few hundred years, or
Definitely, yeah. I mean, you could push up by 1,000 years, much more. Of course, we want to do it as fast as possible because
of course.
But yeah, I mean, that's what's brilliant about it. And that might not be convincing enough for people. But at the end of the day, like, if that person is perfectly preserved, like, they're there. I mean, that's real. You know what I mean? It's certainly convincing enough for me, and it's a hell of a lot more convincing than rotting in the ground. So,
yeah. Well, one of the things seems that kind of exercise with the tech tree, among other things, did for you is really focus you. And I share this sentiment as well, and I'm sure Max does, but having done that and having kind of come to your conclusions that cryonics should be the focus, how did it feel to you to know that you are doing literally the most important thing in the world you could be doing?
Should we call it God's work?
Practically. I mean, how many people can say, having really analyzed it, that what they're doing in their life, or what they're working on, is not just the most important thing in their small area of the world, not just the most important thing in their life, but literally the most important thing you can do. How does knowing that kind of, what kind of emotions does that bring up?
yeah, I mean, it's like I said, I spent about a decade in tech, and you're going and you're selling like hosting to a customer, and it's like, I mean, I had a passion for gaming, I had a passion for coding, right? I mean, they're things that I enjoy, but to an extent, like, you're acting, right? Like, you're putting on a show. You have to pretend that, like, you care way more about this, B2B SaaS service than you really do, right? And it eats at you over time. It's like, I mean, I was, by the time that I left this last company, I was itching to start something that just, like, actually mattered, for the longest time, right? And I mean, these steps were important. Like, you can't just say, hey, I'm going to go work on the most important problem in the world at 12 or at any age if you don't have the experience, because then you're just wasting your time. Like, you need to be in the place, I mean, really, if we're talking about solving like world scale problems, you almost can't have your own problems. Like, you have to, and what I've noticed is that the more I leave the house, the more problems I get, like if I really had to get to a point where, like, I had to shut out a lot of things. I had to make sure I wasn't in a relationship. I had to really, like, and other people can handle these things better maybe, but just for me personally, like, I had to almost like solve or get rid of every problem that I had, so that I could really get to a point where I was focusing on problems that weren't mine, right? Like, if you're worried every day about some new problem in your life, or worried about paying rent next month, like, you can't focus on world scale problems. You just can't. You need a clear mind. So once I was finally at that point, I mean, it was nice. It was is what I've been waiting for the last 10 years. And yeah, I mean, I wish. It's lonely because a lot of people don't understand why this is the most important problem in the world. But I'm very convinced that it is. So it's life or death. Yeah.
It is life or death, and I have a little bit of a mini game I play with people. It's somewhat obnoxious, but essentially, I ask anybody to tell me something they're working on, or some project that's really important, or anything that's really important, and then I just add the words, "It doesn't matter when you're dead," to the end of the sentence. And you can do that for practically anything, and then people eventually go to, yeah, well, what about my children? Well, they're going to be dead too, so it doesn't matter when they're dead. And it kind of, for me, that's very focusing, because anything your mind wanders onto may feel important, and may in fact be important momentarily, but then I just come back, it doesn't matter if you're dead.
Well, and that's the thing too. It's like, you know, tackling the death problem isn't, it's like, you can't even say it's the most important problem. It's the only problem. If we eliminate death, every other problem becomes temporary. And then they're not really problems. They're just, I mean, in 20 years, it's gone. Oh, that sucked, right? It's like death is the only true problem that we're up against. So yeah, it's not even like it's the most important thing in the world. It's the only important thing in the world. And I would argue that nothing matters until we solve it. Because even if we individually don't, live forever, if humanity doesn't find a way to become an immortal species, then everything we ever did was pointless, useless, turns into dust. I mean, we might as well have never done it. So
I love that the only problem, either good to note as a future book title or TED Talk.
Yeah.
Cryonics, the only problem.
Right. Exactly.
I think a lot of people, though, would say that the problems they're working on are kind of indirectly, so somebody who mentioned somebody who's trying to prevent war or something, right? So, I mean, they're indirectly trying to prevent or stop people from dying, right? Or somebody who's worried about existential risk, or somebody who's worried about, what's the next rock that's going to fall out of onto our planet. There's many ways of being able to prevent death rather than sort of a direct medical path that we're discussing here. But
yeah, I mean, there are many fields that are working on the death problem. Elon Musk is working on the death problem with Tesla, because car crashes are the leading cause of death for ages 5 to 29, right? So by making cars safer, by making self-driving cars, that's working on the death problem. So I mean, absolutely, you don't have to be working directly in this field, but at the same time, cryonics is the only technology that directly targets the death problem. The rest of the others are indirectly. So
I do want to push back against something else you mentioned, though, which is you said, well, you've become kind of a hermit in order to be able to move forward on all these different things. And I would say that I think that with the right, you don't have a relationship, you don't go outside too much. I would say with the right person and the right kind of relationship, or being in the right environment external to your home and all this, it can be conducive to being able to focus on these problems, right? The right relationship, for example, would satisfy aspects of you that, the socializing and all this stuff in a way that is just right and kind of enables you to feel good and happy and okay when you're pushing on other problems, or solves issues around the home or in life that you wouldn't want to personally have to deal with, but your partner can deal with. So I would say that there's benefits to, not getting too hauled up in a corner when working on a big problem.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. If it was as far as relationships go, if it were the right person for all those reasons, I think you are right. Difficult to find, right? Most of my relationships have just been exhausting. So I can't afford to be exhausted right now. I have enough on my plate. So yeah, maybe in time. And plus, I'm very much an introvert. So most social experiences just exhaust me. As far when it comes to extroverts, social experiences energize you, right? So it's different for people. But I've always done my best work being a bit of a hermit, but still, getting out to events, and there are people that you have to meet, and there are things that are necessary to do in your life. So
like the Alcor 50th conference.
Exactly.
We met in person.
That's one that was very important. I got to meet a lot of people for the first time. First time I met Aubrey in person, actually. Yeah, no, it's you don't have to be a complete hermit. And plus, I mean, this company, unlike all of my previous ones, will be completely in person, right? We won't be a remote company. obviously. So that's another piece of it. But it's just, there's times where you really just have to kind of block things out and apply yourself. And I've gotten quite good at doing that. So.
So speaking of this company, this is the big project you're working on, Cryopets, and I don't think we've given a full explanation of it yet, but we'll get into all the nitty gritty details. But a general overview: it's a animal hospital with some type of cryonics integrated into the company. So starting there, first, where is the company located?
Yeah, so here in Salt Lake City, here in Utah.
And is it just you, or what other people are on this team? What does the team look like as it stands?
Yeah, so as of now, it's just me. As far as our advisory board, we have, we're going to be working closely with 21st Century Medicine, of course. You pretty much have to in this field. And Greg has just been awesome with going over sort of the nitty gritty details with me and walking me through a lot of the obstacles ahead and all that. So I've been really grateful for him in those ways. And also Aubrey Gray is on our scientific advisory board as well. And Tanya Jones, who did the persiflation work over at Aragos Biomedical, which was incredible. I think one of the coolest things that has been done in this field in the past decade or so. And so yeah, as of now, it's just me. We are hiring for 5 positions right now, which are all listed on the website, mostly veterinary positions. So like pretty standard veterinary hospital positions, but it'll have to be veterinarians that are willing to do the cryonic stuff. So and then we're also hiring a lead as far as training on the actual procedure. But yeah, for now, as far as the team goes, just me still.
Okay. And are there any critical positions that you are going to have to fill that you haven't yet? And aside from the kind of veterinary hospital ones you mentioned, and are there specific people you'd like to try to get for those?
Yeah, in time, there's a lot to do up front, right? We actually have to build the facility before we start bringing on all these new employees. So for now, it's just a lot of the preliminary steps that I can handle on my own. As far as sort of more C-level positions, it's not something that I like to dive into at like pre-seed or seed stage. I think that's something that comes later. So mostly, so a big thing that I'm cognizant about that I think a lot of the industry chooses to ignore is that the only people performing these procedures are going to be doctors. Even though it's legal for anyone to perform these procedures because the animal is legally dead, it's sort of something that I've not been a fan of. I think the fact that majority of people that perform suspensions today, I think actually all of everyone in the cryonics industry that performs suspensions today are not medical doctors, and that's just a huge problem. Like that's not good. They call them patients, but they're not treating them like patients, and that bothers me. These procedures, even though their heart isn't beating anymore. I mean, it's very important that we treat this very, very carefully and make sure that we have transparent logging and just verify that these procedures are being done correctly and that the efficacy is very, very good. So all of our are people that are actually performing these cryopreservations are going to be doctors, and because of that, they're going to need to be trained because there's not we don't have like a pool of veterinary doctors that are also cryonicists, right? So we're going to bring in like, fairly standard veterinary doctors, but then bring in sort of these suspension training leads. Tanya will be one of them to actually train them on the procedures and make sure that we're developing, standardized procedures for, a multitude of different species, right? With a focus on mammals, but we've had people reach out for reptiles, for fish, mostly mammals, but there's been a few interesting ones. So we want to make sure that we can, I think one of our huge advantages, because we are a hybrid facility, because we have the animal hospital and the cryonics facility sort of merged together, that allows us, of course, to do the cryopreservation procedure directly after euthanasia, right? And of course, this would only be when the animal is already at the end of its natural life, when it's decided that it's the humane thing to do to euthanize them, but it allows us to have lab quality suspensions. And one of the reasons this is so important is, we can go to the Brain Preservation Foundation or, any third party university or neuroscience division somewhere, multiple of them, and we can have them come in and really give us the badge of approval that we are getting lab quality cryopreservation of these animals, of the bodies and of the brains. And this is something that no other cryonics facility can do, because they're all doing field cases with humans, right? And in field cases, the body, hopefully someone's there, but if not, maybe it takes hours for someone to find the body. They have to get declared dead. They finally make it to the cryonics facility. There's hours of warm ischemia. It's just, it's a shit show, right? So that suspension, the quality of it is like, no neuroscience organization is gonna be like, yeah, you guys are doing great. So they can't go and do that. So I think that's going to be a huge advantage for us. And it's something that I think we need to take a lot more care and a slower approach when it comes to humans, because those field cases are so bad, and we need to find ways to improve those. And our animals are much luckier than we are. They're smaller. They're the vast majority of the time, their deaths aren't a surprise, right? The vast majority of the time, it's euthanasia. So yeah, our animals will get immortality before we do, and hopefully we can use the lessons that we get from that. We can continue to push the field forward, and then eventually do the same for humans. But there's some really big problems that need to be solved there before I feel comfortable selling it.
Speaking of immortal animals, as soon as we switched over to the cryopets topic, this one decided to come and say hello. So hopefully she'll be one of your first, well, not first clients, for hopefully one of your clients at some point.
Eventually.
Yeah, eventually.
Very, very, very long time.
Yeah, in many years from now. Alethea.
Alethea. Wow.
Yeah, beautiful. An unusual name. It's similar to the name of the Greek goddess of a little known Greek goddess of truth. So,
cool. Yeah, my cat's around here somewhere. She's a little shy, I guess. So maybe she'll stop in at some point.
Come in and say hello. Could you tell us, and I know you're still working out many of these details, but could you give us a little bit more of an idea of sort of the timeline of, well, this is what's going to come first, this is what's going to come second, this is third, and then finally fourth is to open the doors for the first public clients. But so finding the right personnel, vet staff, is that the first step, or is finding a site location? Might you still consider even purchasing an existing veterinary hospital and just adding a back room with the cryonics related stuff? Like what tell us a bit more about those details.
Yeah, so I've considered that, and it's still on the table if the perfect one were to present itself. A lot of the problem is, most veterinary hospitals are kind of a joke. They're usually, like, just veterinary science isn't you go to a human hospital and then you go to a veterinary hospital and you're like, wow, this is a huge difference, right? A lot of the times they're next to like the Dollar Tree in like a tiny space, or they do surgeries in the basement. Like, it's just like, it's not impressive. I hate taking my cat. I've hated taking her to every vet just because it doesn't bring me a ton of confidence when I see these places, right? So as far as, the facility, there is, we would obviously need a large storage area. We would need some lab space that isn't just the checkup rooms. We would need, there's a few sort of layout details that you need to have, like a CT, scanning machine in there. So it would be difficult to find the perfect building. It would likely be a lot easier just to build. And I'm currently raising enough to build. So it's what I would prefer, but definitely, keeping the option open for the other, if something were to pop up, but nothing has yet. So yeah, finding personnel isn't the first thing, because if we do choose to build the facility, it'll take 6 to 8 months. I've had a couple architects in the area have put some mock-ups together of what this might look like, and whenever we start doing that, it'll be about 6 to 8 months. So I'm hoping that sometime next year the facility will be built, and we can start equipping it with everything that's needed. Of course, at that point, we won't be able to open the doors just yet, because we need to do the training. We need to start putting together sort of these standardized procedures and protocols. There's still some legwork to do, but we can open the actual veterinary hospital part sooner than we do the cryonics part, right? So that would likely be open sooner, and then hopefully not too long after that, we actually introduce the cryonics on top. So yeah, I mean, I would, I'm hoping that next year we can start doing suspensions. Of course, that's best case scenario. So time will tell. The economy is insane right now. Raising money. I mean, I started raising at the beginning of the year. So for anyone that's like, who knows sort of the fundraising field, it's absolutely insane right now.
Yeah.
A lot of it has just completely halted. Some companies still getting through it, very, very shit valuations that aren't good for the founder, especially when it comes to a company like mine, where we're raising a lot of money, and we're a deep tech company, not like some software, whatever, right? So but we still have good momentum. So I'm just going to keep carrying it, and hopefully be able to wrap up the round either this fall, or if it takes a little longer, things to recover, beginning of next year.
Hopefully you got some checks in before things,
Yeah, so we raised a chunk, but yeah, we're still raising. So.
And when you were talking about the facilities, it made me think, why have the veterinary hospital portion and the storage portion kind of in the same building? Doesn't it create more flexibility if you have the vet hospital sort of front end and in one part of town, maybe where you get more people walking by and just looks nicer and such, and then the storage facility a few blocks, a few miles away, in a place where economically it makes more sense to do it there, or for some other reason it makes more sense to do it there? Have you considered that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of factors, right? Cost is obviously the biggest one. It would be quite a bit more expensive to have two separate facilities, even if one is just for storage. I think that there's also the transport, which is something that is worth noting. The less we have to transport these pets would be better for cost, for everything. Yeah, I think it's just it removes a lot of friction to have it together at first. And when it comes to startup, you really just have to remove as much friction as you can. In the future, I mean, we really won't even need the veterinary hospital, right? I mean, all we're doing here is proving a point. we're raising a seed round. I've done the market research, which by the way, I'll end up publishing sometime, but it's incredible. I mean, people are much more inclined to cryopreserve pets than they are humans, because it doesn't come off to them as selfish. It's the openness that I got from responses of very like widespread surveys I've done has been really, really impressive. So I know there's a market there. It really comes down to us converting those into customers and educating them on what we need to educate them on. So all we have to do is prove the point that under a veterinary hospital, right, when it's their doctor telling them about this procedure, that conversion rate is high enough, right? It doesn't even have to be incredibly high. It just has to be high enough. There's over 400 million pets in the US. Tens of millions of pets die every year. They have short lifespans, right? I mean, even if we were to capture a very, very small portion of that market of people who want to cryopreserve their pets, I mean, we're still a multi-billion-dollar company, right? Very, very small portion would still make us a multi-billion-dollar company. So, there is a market here. There is a way that we can make cryonics venture backable, scalable. And once we prove that point in our veterinary hospital, that let's say 20% of people, 10% of people decide to cryopreserve their pet when they have to come in to euthanize their pet, then we just, at that point, we've proven our market. We have to scale now. I go raise a $20 million Series A, and I put a portion of that into getting our first veterinary hospitals on board. We'd focus on one in every state. So we try to get the first 50 in the continental US is where we would start, right? And once we have that, we have access to all 400 million pets across the US, right? And people can just go to a local facility, and we will have that facility equipped with not only the training, but the equipment, everything they need to perform suspensions. And then following the suspension, the pet would just be transferred to our facility back in Utah for the long term.
So let's back up here for a second. So what you see as sort of the longer term play is having contracts with veterinary hospitals around the country, or maybe someday beyond. And then you provide training and equipment and that kind of thing. So they will do the procedures locally to whoever, who then ships you the animal cryopreserved.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
exactly.
and you wouldn't so you see this as contracts with existing veterinary. You wouldn't be starting your own veterinary hospitals or clinics in multiple locations, nor would you be sort of franchising the Cryopets name, but instead you'll just have a contract with numerous veterinary hospitals.
Exactly. And then, I mean, once it's in enough locations, like I said, we don't even need the veterinary hospital anymore. And I mean, it's a passion of mine. I probably keep it open. And if people want to come straight to us for the suspension, then they can do that. But it doesn't become necessary anymore because we would have so many locations that are actually doing the procedure. And then we would just spend our time in research and improving the procedure and then shipping out the improvements of the procedure to all the veterinary hospitals. So yeah, I mean, I think that's, I mean, when I was thinking, because look, I mean, we've been here for 50 years. Cryonics is still a fringe topic. If I came into the space and said, yeah, I'm just going to start another human cryonics facility and maybe I'll do a little better marketing and I'll have a better website because I have my tech background, it's not going to be the catalyst to getting widespread cryonics. It's just not, right? In my opinion, the catalyst to getting widespread cryonics is just getting it into hospitals. I think there's no other way that we can get this to everyone and have it be as legitimate as it needs to be, getting into hospitals. Now, getting into human hospitals is very difficult, right? You have to, I mean, if you walk into a human hospital right now and ask them to do cryonics, they're just going to tell you no, like they're just not going to do it. If we can prove this at the animal level and basically go to these veterinary hospitals and make it a no-brainer for them. We say, okay, 10% or 20% of the people are opting into this. You're going to make more money. We're going to equip you and train you completely for free, right? Then why the hell would they not do it? We're going to bring them customers. If they're one of the only ones in Missouri then all the Cryopets customers in Missouri that we're marketing to are going to go to that veterinary hospital, and they're going to be customers of that veterinary hospital because they're one of the hospitals that is partnered with Cryopets, right? It's going to get to a point where people are not going to go to hospitals unless they have cryopreservation procedures in place. Because why would you risk permanent death if you have a surgery for your dog, if you have anything, if you have to put your cat under anesthesia to get her teeth cleaned? Why would you go to a veterinary hospital that doesn't have the cryopreservation procedures? It'd be ludicrous, right? So that's what I see as the inflection point for cryonics. That giant hockey stick growth will come when that switches in people's heads and they say, well, I'm not going to go to that veterinary hospital because I'm risking my pet's life, right?
Well, I might say that Emil might disagree. Emil from Tomorrow Biostasis might disagree that, you know, better marketing and a better approach and sort of spiffing things up and having a tech background or not. He might say this might actually make a difference for human cryonics.
It helps. And look, I love Emil. I've met him multiple times. I think he's a great guy. I think what Tomorrow is doing is innovating on the cryonic space in a bunch of different ways. I think it's fantastic. Obviously, there's things I would do differently, and I wouldn't start with humans, of course, like I mentioned. But I think I think Emil has seen some good growth because there was a lot of people in Europe and surrounding areas that were already interested in cryonics, who were already interested in Alcor, but were of course across the world, and now have a facility to go to that isn't like CryoRus, right? Now have like a real facility to go to. So I think a lot of growth came from that. Time will tell if he continues to have a lot of good growth and if that marketing is actually going to pay off at a larger scale. Do I think that some better ads and a YouTube channel with videos and some better marketing, do I think that's going to make cryonics become one of the biggest things on planet Earth? Absolutely not. I think we need to get it into hospitals, but I'm glad that we're both doing those approaches because both of them are helping and something's going to work eventually. So I'm biased, of course. I think my strategy is going to work. So, yeah.
You did mention the 10 to 20% number and for proof of concept. I'm assuming in your market research, that was done partially by surveys. Do you have any more concrete proof of concept, maybe with any actual, working veterinarians who are pro cryonics who have attempted to maybe tell each one of their patients, or someone who's euthanizing one of their pets to, go to the Cryonics Institute or Alcor? How did you get that 10 to 20%, and how certain are you that that's a number would actually pan out?
Yeah, so the 10 to 20% is pretty arbitrary. In fact, what I was mentioning earlier, for us to become a multi-billion-dollar company or whatever, it could be much smaller than that, right? Maybe 5% or less. Now, as far as our market research, I've done surveys with thousands of people across the U.S. Haven't been basing it on any kind of income or anything that would kind of fudge the numbers to make it look better. Just people in the U.S. who are pet owners. That's the only restriction I had on these surveys. And from thousands of responses, very good sample sizes. It's only I think 25% of people who are against the idea, right? It was like 31% of people who were an absolute yes, said, I want to do this for my pet. I want to save my pet in this way. And then it was something, I think like 44, 45% that were in the maybe column, need more data, need more information, right? Yeah, we would just have to capture a small portion of this market. It would be people who, already spend a great deal on their pet. A good example of this is people who do cancer treatments for their pets, which are very expensive. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars for cancer treatments, but there's still a big portion of pet owners that will do these for their pets because they want to keep their pets alive. And the worst part about it is with cancer treatments, you maybe only get an extra 6 months or an extra year, maybe 2 years with your pet, even if the cancer treatments go, relatively well. So, yeah, there's a market when it comes to the actual consumer. Now, when it comes to veterinarians or veterinary hospitals, they're businesses. I have no interest in going to veterinary hospitals and trying to fill a bucket with holes in it, right? I have no doubt that we would get one or two yeses here and there. Yeah, sure. Just because they're interested in it, they think it's cool. But if I go to them with those numbers, if I go to them and say, you'll make this much more money because we have this data showing that this percentage of people buy into this and actually want to save their pet this way, then, and you know, like I said, this is post Series A, this would be part of our growth budget. Those, at least those first 50 hospitals, we would equip them and train them completely for free. So we would be going to them and saying, we're going to bring you customers, right? We're going to do everything for free for you. And you're going to make more money because of it through the procedures. So I want to go to these veterinary hospitals and have it be a no-brainer, where they would have to be idiots to say no. So as far as like market research right now, yeah, like if I went to a veterinary hospital, I was like, hey, would you know, work with a cryonics facility? We'd probably get a lot of no's, but it's just going to be a much different conversation at that time. And at the same time, like, you know, if a veterinary, because I think you mentioned, like, if a veterinarian was to tell their client about cryopreservation and then go to the facility, it's much different when the facility is this weird building in the middle of nowhere, like Scottsdale, Arizona. You know what I mean? Like, this needs to be in the hospital. This needs to be a procedure that is performed by your veterinarian, by your doctor in the hospital, to have that legitimacy. Otherwise, it's just weird. It's just weird. It's not something. I'm my customer. I have my cat. I don't want my cat to die. So I know exactly what I would be willing to do. And that would be weird to me. I would not be willing to ship my cat off to some weird facility. Like, I would want them to do this in the veterinary hospital. So
speaking of the veterinary hospital that you're going to be starting early on, is it going to be basically a normal veterinary hospital? You can go there and get, you know, spays and neuters and, you know, having a cardiac issue, you know, all the usual stuff, you know, dental cleanings. Is it just going to be a normal veterinary hospital, or in what ways is it not?
absolutely. It will be completely standard, normal. Time will tell if we do more of the emergency route. I think we probably will, where we're kind of also like the emergency veterinary hospital, 24-hour, right? Because I think a lot of our customers would appreciate that, right? Especially for what we offer. Yeah, no, our customers will come for checkups, for cleanings, for everything.
So let me, in that case, let me ask you a question where it's going to sound like I'm being an unpleasant conspiratorial cynic or something. But I think for a lot of people, if you told them that you're going to go to a hospital and you're going to have a procedure done, but this hospital is a little different. It's a perfectly normal hospital in the front, but in the back room, they also run a funeral service. But don't worry. Of course, they have no interest in you know, hastening your how quickly you make it to the back room. Don't worry, even though they have a profit motive to have you end up there. Now, I might not be so cynical that I would worry about this, but a lot of people might. So do you feel like that could be a problem?
So what you're describing is a problem with the entire health industry, right? The doctors profit when you're sick. This is with every hospital everywhere, animal and human hospital. They make more money if you continue to be sick. So it's one of those things, and people still go to hospitals, right? I mean, the fact of the matter is, like, at the end of the day, you trust your veterinarian, you trust where you're at. If you don't trust it, then don't go there, right? But yeah, I mean, I don't think it makes us a great deal different than any other medical provider in the world. It's going to come down to, yeah, I mean, your doctor could give you medicine that isn't going to work properly, and you'd end up sicker, and then they could keep bringing you back. But, like, at the end of the day, you trust that, you know, these people are here to help you. You know, these people care. These people are doing this because they care, right? Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of things that we can do to, you know, help, you know, mitigate sort of conspiracy theories like that. But at the end of the day, yeah, I mean, yeah, it's not really different than any other hospital. So
I think if one way I would respond to that is to say, that it's in your interest, it's in the interest of the veterinary hospital to keep your animal healthy, happy, to do everything possible to make it, to show you how professional, how well done, how advanced all of the medicine is at the veterinary hospital, because everybody knows that yes, eventually the animal will end up in the back room.
Right.
But the only way it's going to end up in the back room is if you've proven as a company that the front side of that hospital cares, knows what they're doing, has the right procedures in place, is technologically there. So in providing a good service throughout the animal's lifetime, you're demonstrating that you're going to be able to provide a good service at the end of that animal's lifetime. So that's exactly the reason why one wouldn't want to, that the accusation that you're going to not try as hard because you expect the animal to end up in the back room is ridiculous. Because as soon as the person sees that you're not providing good service, or you're not trying hard, or you're not really interested in the animal's life, that'll be the end of their being a customer.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a great point. And yeah, at the same time, I mean, once someone's a member, or once someone's are already a customer of ours, as far as we know that their pet is going to be cryopreserved eventually at our facility, we would want to push that off as far as possible, even just for financial reasons, right? Because we would only have to start paying for the upkeep, the liquid nitrogen, right? Once they're actually cryopreserved there. I mean, prior to that, we already know that we have that customer, and so there's not really even a financial motive to rush them in, right? But no, I mean, yeah, that's a great point as well. Yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, it's going to come down to customers trusting me too, as like the leader of the veterinary hospital. I mean, I one of the big reasons that I started this, not only because I think, pets is sort of the route to getting cryonics widespread, is also because my cat, right? Like I have a cat who is 10 years old now. Something like 50% of cats over 15 get dementia. So even if she's healthy physically, which she is currently, there's still a high chance that her mind will start going in 5 years, and 5 years isn't a lot of time, right? I mean, this is very much like a, yeah, I mean, I just, I'm, like I said, I'm my own customer. I'm doing this because I don't want animals to die, at the end of the day. I don't want anyone to die, anything that can form memories, anything that has a unique personality. I mean, we have to solve this problem. So,
And when you kick this off, I mean, like you said, eventually you want to sort of have everybody around the country, maybe even someday around the world, have access to this. When you start, are you going to primarily market to local people in Salt Lake City, or are you going to be marketing around the country and say, well, if you'd like, someday for Alethea to make it here, fly, you have to fly here, and we'll do the procedure here, obviously before you get a chance to expand the way you were describing. What is that initial kind of addressable market for you?
Yeah. So it's a little of both. I mean, so far, just people who have signed up have been all over the U.S., right? I think the something that you wouldn't really think about Utah, because it seems like more of a religious state with the high population of Mormons, is you really have two types of people in Utah. You have Mormons and you have atheists, right? So you have people who are very, very much, they love religion, they're into it. And then you have people who are like very, very much against religion. They're not into it because they've been approached 1 million times by the missionaries. You know what I mean? Like they've decided religion isn't for them. So, and what you find in other states is more gray area. And the gray area is actually not as good, right? Because for people to become cryonicists, I mean, people who are kind of like, oh, well, I'm spiritual, I believe in a God, but I'm not really practicing. That's not really the perfect, some of these people are still cryonicists, but it's not the perfect market. I mean, if we had a perfect market, it's mostly going to be atheists who are into this, as far as like the initial chunk, right? So Utah, as a religious state, actually provides a larger concentration of those people who are not religious to be than other states. And at the same time, I mean, this is, I mean, there's almost been this notion that like cryonics and religion are enemies. And I have to play off of that at first because I know that's how a lot of people are going to initially react. And we have to be ready for that. But there really is nothing that's stopping a religious person to sign up for cryonics any more than religious people would be against CPR or against really anything. I mean, if you believe in an afterlife, you don't have to be in a rush to get there. You still try to stay healthy. You still go get a surgery if you need it. This is just a medical procedure that's meant to extend life. So there's really not a battle there. And I'm hoping that's something that through the right wording and marketing that we can avoid. And actually get a lot of religious people to sign up too, because I would love that, right? There's also the Mormon Transhumanist Association here, which is massive, and they are all very, very pro cryonics. So yeah, there will be some good local things to tap into, but yeah, I mean really the goal long term is across the U.S. So I'm not too worried about the location. The location choice was more just a safe area, and then a few other factors. There's actually only 6 states in the U.S. where you can own a veterinary hospital without being a veterinarian yourself.
Interesting.
So this was one of them, and it's also one of the safest places you can be long term, crime wise, natural disaster wise. So. That's the main reason. We'll reach everyone across the U.S. eventually. That's not the problem. So,
and if anybody has more thoughts on the matter of religious people being able to become cryonicists, we suggest to go back and hear the episode with Joe Kowalski, who is religious and spoke at great length about the ways in which he felt that the two were not just compatible, but in his opinion, one led right into the other one. So,
right. Yeah, no, there's a lot of cool kind of combinations there. The Mormon transhumanists are way into it because they believe in, they believe that there will be a period called the millennium, I believe, where it's a period of 1,000 years where there's no death on Earth, and they believe in physical resurrection of the human body, and so a lot of them believe that cryonics is the way that we do that, is the way that we actually trigger that to happen, is through this technology. So there's a lot of ways that cryonics can play into religion. I think it just comes down to really just educating people on that and not making it weird and kind of culty, like cryonics is its own religion and you can't be in a different religion kind of thing that has somehow kind of happened in the past. And it's just a medical procedure. We're just going to get it into hospitals and people are going to opt into it because we should be trying to save our pets in every way we can, and then humans as well eventually. So
now I know the Cryonics Institute charges somewhere between $5,000 and $6,000 for their pet procedures. Alcor varies between $5,000 and $30,000 depending on neuro or whole body. And obviously this is open to change, but initially, what do you plan to charge and for which exact procedures?
Yeah, so Cryonics Institute can get it pretty low because they do straight freezes. I have no interest in doing a straight freeze. I think I think there's still a non-zero chance that you could fix or extract some sort of information there, but it's just very, very it's just not something I'm interested in doing unless it's absolutely necessary, right? In those cases. And then, Alcor, they also offer, I think they actually do neuro only for pets, which is weird because no one wants to have their pet's head cut off. It's just like so bizarre that obviously they're not getting the numbers that they would want to because it's just ridiculous. But beyond that, they also restrict it, so you have to be a member yourself at both organizations in order to have your pet cryopreserved there, which in my opinion is completely backwards. I think pets are actually the gateway to getting more people interested in cryonics, instead of limiting only cryonics pet owners to cryopreserve their pets. So it's just backwards. At the same time, you have to keep in mind neither of these facilities have standardized, dedicated procedures for pets. They just modify the human one a little bit and do the best they can. And majority of the time it ends up in straight freezes. A lot of times people are just shipping the pets there in ice and then they just do a straight freeze. They can't go directly from euthanasia because they're not a veterinary hospital like we are. So it's just, in my opinion, neither of those facilities or any facility in the world right now offers pet cryopreservation. I think they mostly try to offer some form of it because people love their pets, of course. 95% of people in the US consider their pet to be part of their family. So as a Cryonics facility, you kind of have to offer it in some way. Otherwise, people feel like they're leaving their pet behind or losing them like a child. Yeah, in my opinion, it's just not real what they're doing there. And it's just, yeah, it's just, they don't have a focus on it. They don't market it. They don't develop any scientific progress for it. So
it's practically,
but
practically on their secret menu.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and I've reached out to Alcor for my cat before, just in case something were to happen out of the blue before I have my facility up and running, right? Because at the very least, right, it's better than nothing. And they just, even just the way that they work with pet owners, they weren't willing to do any sort of custom arrangement with me in any way. They weren't willing to send me any kind of emergency kit, or it was just, I mean, it was a mess. It was a mess. I mean, I could write a book on everything that Alcor is doing wrong, along with the other organizations, without, I mean, we could spend another hour just talking about that, but it's like, in my opinion, it's just a complete shit show. I think they're just, the quality of the cryopreservations are just not there. There's no leadership. The nonprofit was the wrong route. They have no customer support. I've talked to people who have gone 10 years without a message from Alcor, even though they're members and they pay their dues every year. Not even a, hey, how you doing? Are you still alive? What's your newest, do you have any new health concerns that we should be aware of? Where do you live now? Anything, like any kind of customer support just doesn't exist, right? It's just, yeah. So yeah, when it comes to, and the only reason I mentioned that, because you mentioned like the procedures over at Alcor and those other ones. It's just, in my opinion, it's just, it's pretty bad. So we need to innovate on that. As far as pricing goes, I've been talking to Greg a lot about this, try to nail down exactly where it'll be. It at least to start, everything gets cheaper at scale, and I believe that we're going to be one of the fastest ones to scale through those veterinary hospitals. So we'll probably be able to get it down into the low thousands before too long. As far as at the beginning, it might be upwards of 10,000 for like a cat. Maybe for large dogs, it can be much more. Time will tell. It is a little early to try to put an exact number on it. But yeah, obviously the goal is to get that down as low as possible so that it's not, unachievable for pet owners, of course. So
now, do you see, if you can get that price down, do you see cryonics for people's pets directly competing with, more invasive treatments for pets, such as like a cancer treatment, like you said earlier, might only give your pet a year or two, and under terrible conditions? Do you see cryonics not just necessarily being only purely last ditch effort, end of life, but as a decent financial option for people who don't want to spend 10 grand watching their pet decay over a bunch of years?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think naturally that will happen. I think, it gets to a point where, obviously you don't like watching your pet suffer. And if we have these procedures that are, verified by these neuroscience organizations that we're actually achieving like really, really incredible ultrastructure preservation of the brain, it would be, I think in a lot of cases, it would probably be even just more humane and a safer option for people instead of their pet suffering. And cancer treatments are very tough on them, and yeah, when it comes to like dementia, like if my cat, if her mind was starting to fail her and we had this incredible method of preservation, like that would be incredible. I don't have to watch her slowly drift away and try all these treatments and put her through all this suffering. I mean, so yeah, I think naturally it will, compete, if you will, with those other approaches. But yeah, time will tell.
Let me ask you, and then I'll let Daniel get back to it. But it just occurred to me, if someone, I'm sure you'll have to deal with some difficult, tricky ethical questions here, right? But if someone came to you and said, "Look, I'm going to be moving. I'm going to be moving into a much smaller place, and I'm not going to have space for, I have 3 big dogs, and I'm not going to have space for them," or something. But they're kind of, in the middle of their life, maybe last quarter of their life, but I have to move now. I don't want to put them up for adoption. I don't want to give them to my, mother-in-law or whatever. I kind of want to just cryopreserve them now. How would you feel about, and maybe other kind of tricky situations like that? How would you approach that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't think we'd be able to do anything like that and feel good about it until we have maybe even innately reversible cryopreservation, or at least perfect preservation where we know that we're going to get them back in the future. Otherwise, I think that's past the line that I would be comfortable with. I'm just because I haven't even really considered it before. I'm not sure of the legalities around euthanizing a perfectly healthy pet inside of a veterinary hospital. I mean, I know so many pets are killed every year in shelters, right? So yeah, I'm not sure about all of that, but I don't think it's something that I would be comfortable with or accept. It would have to be, the pet is at the end of its natural life, or suffering from dementia or one of those cases,
or physical suffering or something.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So
you had touched on it earlier about the types of pets you would initially, obviously cats and dogs, but how soon after, or whether you think you would do hamsters, rabbits, ferrets, reptiles, birds, and then maybe even eventually larger animals.
Yeah, we've gotten requests for horses, which would be big. Maybe that's the only animal that I would consider doing neuro only, unless people are really willing to pay the price that would come with that, because obviously that would be a huge. We need one of Alcor's Bigfoot doers, just for one horse, maybe even bigger. So it'd be tough, but yeah, cats and dogs are of course the main focus. I think at the beginning we'll also be able to offer the same for basically any mammal smaller than that as well, right? Like hamsters, rabbits, et cetera. So there are certain animals that do a lot better under freezing conditions, right? Just in general, I mean, amphibians, fish. A fish can freeze solid in a lake and come back, right? So there are, there might be certain types of animals where a straight freeze would be reasonable. Of course, yeah, it's going to come down to a lot of research. I mean, there's not a standardized procedure as far as perfusing a fish, right? With cryoprotectants. This is it's just something we're gonna have to look into. Like I said, our focus is on mammals. The vast majority of pet owners who would opt into this thing are mammals, but yeah, I think it would just be cool in the research end too, because a lot of these animals, like a fish, for example, are probably going to be a lot easier to revive and have innately reversible cryopreservation with than a mammal. And a lot of it just hasn't been touched. I mean, there's a lot of research that can be done here that just hasn't been played with really before in the past. I mean, whole body cryopreservation is just such a taboo field that very, very few have even dared to mess with it. because academics can't really do much of it because their universities aren't going to fund it. So it's just like weird people like me that manage to get money together and throw research at it. So yeah, there's a lot of different pets that I would love to have like standardized procedures for, and it'll come with time.
I wonder if endangered species may also be kind of a market there for it. It's obviously, there's not, but if you have, like a panda or something, and, at the end of its life or at some situation where it needs to be, I'm sure they already do a lot of freezing of gametes from those animals, but having an entire endangered animal at the end of its life cryopreserved, I think would also be a benefit.
I think so too. It would, of course, there's a lot of research on cloning. Of course, cloning isn't like a fantastic solution to endangered species because you kind of lose the genetic diversity, and it becomes kind of difficult to basically save them from extinction. I think it's something that I actually had included in my pitch deck for investors is saving endangered species because it's sort of like a maybe on how all that work, if it'll be necessary, but I think it is like a really cool area to look into. And I think, especially since, you could probably get the zoo or the wildlife, center to just give you the body afterwards, right? And it's just something that we could do as sort of like an altruistic side quest, right? Is like whenever there's an endangered species that dies, we decide to cryopreserve it. Just because, in the future that could be huge. George Church is working on bringing the woolly mammoths back. It's not a woolly mammoth. It's just like an Asian elephant with some fur. Still very cool, but it's not the woolly mammoth. Like, it'd be awesome if we were able to cryopreserve the woolly mammoth and then maybe bring him back one day. That would be incredible. I think my investors were very, very excited about that. I don't know all the applications yet, but it is something that gets people really excited. And it's also one of those things where a lot of times cryonics can be looked at as selfish, and an approach like that could actually be really, really beneficial for like public perception, because trying to save, everyone wants to save endangered species. It's very, it'd be incredible. So
maybe even starting like a separate fund, like a nonprofit, a 501c3 type thing, where there's a fund that funds the preservation of these sorts of animals through cryopets, but then people can donate specifically to that fund with that specific mission.
Yeah, that would be really cool.
Now, I know, and I believe this is just a function of size. Tell me if I'm wrong. Smaller the better, the smaller the easier. But is there anything legally easier about dealing with pets? And if there are some legal challenges when doing cryopreservation with pets, I guess, how do they differ from when you're dealing with humans?
Yeah, it's night and day. Humans, there are so many hoops you have to jump through. Humans still don't really euthanize themselves, right? We don't really do that. Not every state even accepts it yet. I know there's organizations that are working towards that for other reasons, not for cryonics, which is great. I hope that eventually we have death with dignity in every state, right? That would be ideal. And if we can get more cryonics cases going specifically from that, but since that's not really the case, and since most people really just ride it out until sudden death, right? They either die from a heart attack or a stroke or whatever. A lot of times when people aren't around, they still have to be declared dead by a doctor, right? So they would still have to go to the hospital. Again, we need cryonics in hospitals, so that's fine. But for now, there isn't. So there's just that huge delay in getting to the hospital. Then hopefully the hospital decides to cooperate and maybe help out a little bit. There's Alcor has run into quite a few legal issues throughout the years, right? Just with the state, with there's quite a bit there that we can avoid almost completely, There's practically no laws that we have to overcome because the pet is still, I mean, legally dead, even though that means less for animals than it does humans. As long as we're, conducting the rest of our veterinary hospital stuff completely normally, there's no hurdles that we have to get through there. So
now, on the euthanasia front, do you have you said legally can you euthanize an animal any way you want? Does it have to be through a traditional method, or can you do kind of a pure cryoeuthanasia where you progressively cool down an animal until legal death or what have you? So just through hypothermia.
yeah, so if we started like cooling down the animal while it was alive, I mean, obviously that'd be horrible. Maybe there's a way that we could combine it with anesthesia and but what we're really saving there is seconds. If even that, it's perfectly fine. Generally with euthanasia, you take there's a few different ways to do it, but the most common way done in veterinary hospitals is to take a very high dosage of a seizure medication, and it essentially it knocks them out. It renders them unconscious within like 3 to 5 seconds, and then I think it takes about a minute or so for their heart to stop completely. So it would be just directly after that, right when their heart stops, that we can cannulate and begin, cool their body down, perfuse them. So any way that we would, maybe start the process while they're still technically alive, I think it would be A, kind of weird and inhumane and kind of odd to people, but also B, like not really, those couple seconds aren't going to make a difference because we're already cooling down the body. We're directly where we're performing the procedure. So it would be after the heart stops, after death. Yeah.
So you've essentially deemed that I guess seizure medication wouldn't cause, in that short time, wouldn't cause, whatever the mechanism of action is for knocking it out, wouldn't cause enough irreversible damage.
No, yeah, it essentially just stops their heart.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Well, I am jealous of that. Pets can get better overall cryoeuthanasia than us, so I do agree. I am really hoping that through kind of your efforts that it will actually help the politics of human cryoeuthanasia and euthanasia in general. So my fingers are crossed there.
Yeah, I mean, that's the goal, right? Like I have every intention. I mean, when I entered this field, I figured, the focus is going to be pets for a while. If by the time that I would, consider doing humans, there's already an organization or a company that's doing a fantastic job and it's already widespread, then great, right? I seriously doubt that's going to be the case. I think it's going to get to that point where, we have cryopreservation in animal hospitals across the country. And at that point, I would likely decide to, when the time is right, also do it for humans. And then pretty much just repeat the process and try to get it into human hospitals over time, right? So we would build a hospital and put cryonics in it and prove our point, and then slowly introduce it to human hospital, right? Pretty much the same thing. And eventually do this for humans too, because we need it to be in hospitals in order for all of us to get good preservations. Yeah, it's pets is very much the focus for now, but I would very much like to be the cryonics company for both pets and humans eventually in the future. So that's the long-term goal.
Now, given for the actual cryonics procedure with pets, given ideal circumstances, which you're aiming to replicate as much as possible in a kind of controlled environment, I guess on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being a perfect preservation, with almost no damage, if no damage at all, and 1 being a terrible cryopreservation where tons of information is lost, where would you place that procedure currently with the technology available?
Yeah, I mean, lab quality cases of small mammals, it's very impressive. I mean, even just the work that Greg has done at 21st Century Medicine, it's practically indistinguishable from as far as the ultrastructure of the brain before and after, right? So under lab quality conditions, of course, there's ways that we can still improve this. Some of the ways are obviously reducing cryoprotectant toxicity, right? Which of course is causing damage, but it's not necessarily changing the ultrastructure. The structure is there. That is what really is the first priority, because if the structure is there, we can repair the damage, right? That's not the problem. The bigger problem would be inferring where that structure was prior to the damage, which is very, very difficult, right? But yeah, I mean, obviously we want to reduce cryoprotectant toxicity. I want to look into intermediate temperature storage, of course. Like if we can keep them at around, maybe 130, then we're going to prevent a lot of those larger scale fractures that happen later down towards negative 196. And whether those are huge problems or not, we don't really know. So if we can prevent them as much as possible, then that's very ideal. Yeah, so it's really hard to put a number on it now. I do believe that lab quality cryopreservation right now does provide enough ultrastructure, preservation to have revival in the future. So if 10 means revival in the future, then 10, right? But of course, if we can make that revival easier, then fantastic. And then maybe we'd be at like an 8 or something, and slowly improve over time. So
awesome. Yeah, that's pretty. I mean, that's enough to work with. I mean, I could not put, if I had to do that same exercise for human cryopreservation, I think I would be much less hopeful.
Yeah, I'd probably put it around like I don't know. not a high number.
Almost. You almost gave a number there.
Yeah. All right. I've roasted the human cryonics facilities enough this call, so I think a lot of them have their hearts in the right place. It's a very difficult problem to solve. We need new talent. We need new ideas. We need new innovation in the space, and I think the best way to do that is through a venture-backed startup with a lot of money who can really get this moving. We gotta get this going, or we're dead. So,
amen. Yeah. I want to ask again about this marketing issue here. So are you, like you said, you're primarily focused on, I guess it's the right kind of religious person and atheists and et cetera, but how do you actually intend to market in the beginning? Is it just going to be on the website and, through cool events? Like how do you intend to get the word out?
Yeah. So you start with a niche, right? Which we already are with pets. That's how you really start. You start with a niche. You kind of take over that community, and then you start moving bigger and bigger. So yeah, I mean, there are sort of these small-ish communities that we can market very, very strongly to. Obviously, the cryonics community. There's a lot of people who have pets who have been, reaching out and very excited to be customers in the future. They're, like I said, the Mormon Transhumanist Association, a lot of those kind of either transhumanist or life extension communities, Foresight, a lot of these that I'm deeply involved in, that we can find a lot of our initial customer base from. I think there's also going to be the people who come in to the, which is part of the theory that we're testing, is when people come in just as customers of the veterinary hospital, just your everyday standard, come in for check-ins for their cat. If it's something that they're willing to sign up for, directly in the facility, right? So that's going to be another area that we're taking on. And then, yeah, beyond that, it would be marketing much better and more well-funded marketing than has been done for cryonics in the past because we're venture backed, right? But I think the big thing is, for me, the strongest marketing is just getting cryonics where it needs to be, which is in the hospitals. That is the strongest marketing you can possibly have, because then the legitimacy is there, and it's just something that people will opt into without you having to go and sell them on it, right? And cryonics marketing in the past is just it's always made me cringe. The whole even them calling it like sign up for cryonics, it just feels like an MLM. It's just, I don't know. It's always just felt a little weird to me, and I don't want to be a salesman convincing people to not die. Like I'm gonna get it in the right place, and they can make their own decision. And I think an overwhelming amount of people are gonna make the decision to opt into it when it's in that right place. And that's sort of where I see marketing. So
I like it. Let me hit you up, Kai, with a few objections, and so you can respond to these quickly or with more detail, but I'm sure you've considered at least some of these.
Sure.
So the first one is I think an objection that a lot of people have, which is, well, cryonics for pets, this is wrong. This is immoral. There are so many wonderful pets out there waiting to be adopted, waiting for a good home. Why should we spend money, $10,000 potentially, cryopreserving the past and the pets that we've had when there's so many this is I guess this is also an argument against breeders, right? In general, people who buy pets from breeders, which I do. But how do you respond to that?
Yeah, so I mean, you could make the same. Really, the argument comes to the core of like how people really feel about pets and their level of intelligence and their level of consciousness. And because at the end of the day, you could make the same argument about human kids, right? It's immoral, it's unethical to have a child of your own because there's so many kids that need to be adopted, right? Or you could even say like, oh, it's unethical to save your dying kid because there's so many more kids that you can just get another one, right? Which of course is completely ridiculous. Really you can make the same argument for pets. At the end of the day, a fully grown cat like yours can learn up to 25 plus words. They have memories. They dream when they go to sleep, and they can remember those dreams. They have a higher consciousness level, a higher intelligence level than that of a 6-month-old child. So they're very real. Like this isn't I think a lot of people that hasn't really, so many people love their pets. I guess it has really set in, but for the naysayers, I suppose, like, I think they don't really understand the level of realness that exists inside of a pet, which it's very there. It's very scientifically proven, the level of intelligence they have. So, pets have unique memories. They have unique personalities. They're not just stock off the shelf. It's not how it works. They're unique just like we are. And if it's an animal that you have spent, a great deal of time with, some people also haven't had that experience either. I have spent, a great deal of my time over the past decade in front of this computer at home with my cat. Right? I've spent more time with my cat than I have with any living human on this planet. So the relationship that we built over time is something that really only pet owners that get close with the animals understand. And it is not unethical, it is not immoral to want to save your pet. So I've just never, I've always just turned down that argument. It's, I think it just comes from a place of ignorance. So
I would agree. Let me hit you with another one. Okay, so cryonics for pets is immoral because it's entirely possible you end up with thousands, tens of thousands, however many cryopreserved pets that may not have human caretakers around when they wake up. If for example, if you cryopreserve Alethea and then, in 20 years I fall into a volcano and that's it, what would happen to Alethea, right? Where would she go? And how would you respond to this argument?
Yeah, so these pets would be quite lucky. And then the reason I say that is that, and not lucky for you falling in a volcano. That's not what I mean. But
That would be pretty unlucky. Yeah.
yeah, that would be unlucky. What I mean is, if we had pets from, or if some organization came up and we cryopreserved pets 200 years ago, 500 years ago, and they said, hey, we can finally revive these pets, but they don't have owners. I mean, can you imagine the line out front of this place for people who want a 500-year-old cat from, you know, the or a cat from medieval times? I mean, there would be an overwhelming amount of people who would line up to you know, have and take care of these pets in the future. So I don't think there would be any problem with having them be rehomed. But at the same time, you know, like I said, I want this to be a gateway drug into human cryonics. I want people to cryopreserve their pet and then realize, oh, I should also cryopreserve myself. So for the vast majority of cases, I would love it for people to, be there with their pets in the future. But even if not, I mean, I really don't think there would be a difficult problem, you know, getting them into great homes in the future.
Yeah, I completely agree. Being able to tell everybody that you have the, you know, instead of just a normal cat, you have this cryonaut cat, you know, that came from the past. You know, that sounds that sounds pretty awesome. Okay, now for this one, I'm going to put on my real tinfoil hat here. Okay, so just bear with me for one moment. But okay, so what about this objection? Wait a second, you're a fan of cryonics, right? For humans. In fact, we're all fans of cryonics for humans. Is what we're trying to do here really just stockpiling mammalian subjects to be able to, you know, do more experiments with them in some future, so that we don't have to do so many experiments with humans, and being able to perfect the techniques that will finally result in proper human reversibility of cryopreservation?
Yeah. So, and this one kind of ties into like people who are like, oh, what if I get cryopreserved and then I wake up and they're like doing experiments on me, right? The fact of the matter is, like, cloning technology is going to come around. I mean, even in that, I mean, we can already clone practically everything on the planet. I think we even started just cloning things straight from skin cells just recently. You know, cloning humans and developing them without brains to do experiments on in the future, that's probably going to happen in the next like couple decades. So there's no way that anyone would put in the effort to wake you up just to experiment on you, right? It would be like it would be like one of the more difficult strategies for that. So I think it would be dumb. But as far as can you remind me of your original question? I kind of went on a tangent there.
It's kind of saying that what your real goal here is that you want to stockpile a lot of subjects on which to experiment, rather than really caring about getting these animals, you know, from now into the far future and helping them live indefinite lifespans and all this stuff. What your real goal here is, Kai, you're a Sith Lord in hiding. What you're really trying to do is preserve all these animals so that you can use them as guinea pigs for us humans, who will eventually, of course, benefit from all of the failed attempts to revive thousands of pets in the future.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of the weird spot we're in human cryonics right now, is we're almost in this gap where the cryopreservation isn't good enough yet. It's still pretty bad, but the more people that sign up and the more people that get involved means that we can make the technology better for people in the future. And maybe some of those people will never be able to be revived, right? So that is like a crappy spot to be in, right? It's one of the reasons that I don't feel comfortable doing human cryonics yet, because I can't go to someone and look them in the eyes and say that this has a good chance of saving their life as a human. You know, I can't. But I can go to someone and I can say, okay, we're doing perfect, you know, lab quality cryopreservation for these small mammals, right? Where we've already had reversible cryopreservation of animal organs in the past, right? Where we've already, we've shown the level of ultrastructure preservation we have in animal brains in the past, right? So I can very confidently go and do this for pets and you know, be confident that we're going to be able to revive in the future. Whereas with humans, I just can't do that yet. So I do believe that that argument works for humans right now, but for pets and the level of preservation that we're achieving, I think it would be a hard argument to make.
I have two more potential objections. Now, this first one may or may not be an objection, depending on your answer, but there's an intractable debate within cryonics, and that's biological revival versus mind uploading. So without actually getting into that debate, how do you view these two options in regards to pet revival? And specifically, if mind uploading ends up being available before biological revival, will this be something cryopets would actually consider?
Yeah, so I personally have no interest in going to Alcor land for the rest of eternity. It's as they called it at the event. I'm just, it's not for me. In fact, I would say, you know what, just don't wake me up. Yeah, I mean, look, like we're in a, our brain is simulating us right now, right? It's simulating our senses, our feelings. If, you know, I have no doubt that eventually we'll be able to get a simulation, you know, good enough to where you could upload the information that we can get out of the brain, whether it's through scanning or whatever mechanism, and then you know, essentially make a copy of yourself, and the copy would yeah, probably, I mean, yeah, I think it could get good enough to where it would be indistinguishable from our experience right now. That being said, it is a copy of you, right? Obviously, like, it's very philosophical, and there's, like, you know, so many, you know, arguments and topics we can get into for that. But personally, I'm not interested in mind uploading at all. I'm very much going for biological revival. So what I would like to do is and I don't know if the other cryonics facilities do this very much, but, you know, have people write somewhat of a will for what they are interested in having in the future. If there's a certain type of revival, if maybe they can write in like, hey, yeah, revive me, but only if, it's like a good time in the world, right? There's not like a world war going on or something, right? Like, wait a little while, you know, even if it's just scribbled down on a piece of paper, like your desires for the future, and then we can respect those. We could probably do a lot of the same with people's pets. I
know Alcor at least Alcor lets you do this.
Okay.
I wrote one myself, and it's included in the documents. I don't know about CI, Tomorrow Biostasis, or Southern. I don't know about them, but I know at least Alcor lets you do that.
Sure. Yeah, it's which I think is smart. Yeah, and try to, like, respect those wishes as much as possible. It becomes like an ethical question too. Like, would you really upload like a cat's brain to a different kind of simulation, especially if it's not like perfectly matching or the cat's experience previously? Because then it would just be very confused and probably distressed. Whereas us humans, even if it's quite different, we can understand that. We can say, okay, this is why it's different, and then we can probably work our way through it. But you know, it would probably just be very distressing for an animal unless it's indistinguishable from their previous experience. So
I don't know, Kai. I can imagine creating a cat heaven that's pretty cool, right? Like, you know, it's like a lot of tons of places to climb and all kinds of interesting animals scurrying about that they can chase, and like,
absolutely. I think that's very possible. It just comes down to the problem, the clone, the copy problem, right? It's just a completely separate copy of those memories, of that personality. It's not the original. So yeah, I mean, I would rather have like a copy or like a clone of myself than nothing, just because I'd say, like, you know what, good luck, all the best to you, you know, good on you, I'm gone. But I would never consider it to be me. And that's why I'm very much pro biological revival. If mind uploading was possible and before biological revival, which would surprise me, but if it was, then I wouldn't consider it. I would wait until biological revival, especially since time is on our side. There's no reason to rush into anything. So
well, you'll get no argument here. You're preaching to the choir. So
yeah. Well, so then it's fair to say that future cryopet adoptees will not have like access to real life Tamagotchi
Yeah.
pets. So,
Right, exactly. Yeah.
and then if Max put on his tinfoil hat for that other one, I'm going to put on an even more ridiculous hat. So
Sure.
For the last objection, some religious people have, who I've encountered in cryonics, believe the idea of a soul in an afterlife. Now, obviously, I don't think any of us believe that, but given that it's a scientific fact that all dogs go to heaven, how would you respond to someone who believes that putting a dog in cryostasis would prevent the dog's soul from making its way to, doggy heaven?
Yeah. Yeah, it's such like an incredible topic, right? Because I mean, it really makes you think. Like people temporarily die all the time, right? For whether it's for a few seconds or a few minutes, and then CPR brings them back. There's even surgeries where people are technically dead for quite a bit of time, right? When we our brain practically has no activity when we're even under anesthesia for a surgery. So it really comes down to how you define death. I think we found that, what we thought was death was the heart stopping. We found out later that that wasn't the case. And that death is mostly just the point of where you can't bring someone back to be conscious again. And we've gotten better at extending that over time. But it really begs the question, like, how long can someone be dead before their soul leaves? Or if they're dead for 9 minutes, and then we reanimate them again, is their soul gone? Or was their soul just kind of like hanging out waiting to go back in? How about if the soul can come back in 10 minutes, how about 10 hours, right? Like, where's the cutoff from where the soul seeps away? Obviously there's no scientific backing for any of this. It's just, but yeah, as far as like religious people, it is a very interesting problem that I don't think they have many theories on, at least that I've heard. I think at the end of the day, most religious theories just come down to like, oh, God handles it. So if the person comes back to life, he'll just pop the soul back in there, no big deal. Yeah, what I can tell you is that animals, humans, we can get to the point where, and usually this happens because, at least in the past, death has, pretty ultimately been inevitable. We get to the point where we accept it. Sometimes you just get to the point, you've lived a full life and you're like, all right. Obviously, if you gave those people the option to be young again and have a whole new life, I think a considerable amount of them will take it. But you can still get to the point where you're like, all right, I can accept this. I can accept death. And yeah, I think, sorry, I lost my train of thought a little.
No worries. Actually, as a quick aside to this,
Sure.
you were mentioning earlier about Mormons, and I'm actually curious, in your market research, did you ask any questions about religious people's beliefs about animal afterlife? I mean, it seemed, I would say it wouldn't be generally pertinent, but it kind of is to an extent, if you're trying to eventually get everybody to be utilizing this.
Yeah, so majority of the 25% of people who were against cryonics for pets, majority of the responses were because of religious reasons. So yeah, I think, and like I mentioned before, I think it really comes down to a communication thing where we can get to the point where it's not like one or the other. It's perfectly fine to be religious and a cryonicist. But yeah, most of those people were those people who believed in a heaven. And some of them were just like, why wouldn't you cryopreserve the pet? And they're like, oh, he's just a fish, So like some of them weren't completely fit in that category. Some people are just like, yeah, whatever. He's just like their pets weren't like a cat or a dog. But yeah, I would say like a considerable amount of the no's were very like, this is against God. This is against, my religion. This is, whatever. And I think we can conquer that. And since I remembered what I was, getting at before, humans can get to the point where we can accept death. Animals cannot. Your cat doesn't start getting to the end of its life where it's getting weaker, and to be honest, it doesn't even know it's dying. It doesn't know that. right? It's just confused because it's getting slower and it can't jump as high, and it's incredibly sad, right? Because they can't really cope with those things and like understand them like we do. They don't know why it changed, and they can't get to the point where they're like, yeah, I've lived a great life, ate a bunch of meow mix, and now I can. What I'm saying is, animals can't really get to that point. So we really have, almost an obligation to do everything we can to, not only keep them alive as long as possible and healthy as long as possible, but yeah, really, really kind of not do the irresponsible thing of assuming there's some sort of heaven they're going to go to, because I can guarantee you they don't want to leave. The animals want to continue living. That is a fact. They, until the very end, they fight for survival to live.
Can I play devil's advocate on this one a little bit?
Sure. Yeah.
So I can totally imagine an alternate take to that, which is that if animals don't understand death, they don't fear it, and therefore, is there really any, aside from, a human who's a pet owner wanting to get to experience the pleasure of continued existence with their pet in the future, is there really a moral case that an animal should be cryopreserved when they actually just don't know or care about, or at the very least know, if they can't acknowledge and understand death, why does it matter if they're alive or not alive?
Yeah, they can't necessarily understand death, but they are every day fighting for their survival, right? So as much as they, their instinct is to avoid it, right? As much as possible. Yeah, it's not so much about a fear of death. It's more about the fact that they very clearly want to continue living. They want to be around you. They want to continue living their lives. I mean, every animal, every cell does this, right? Every living thing wants to continue living. So, yeah, I think it's not so much the fear of death that would justify it. I think it's more their desire for life, even though they don't really understand the the implications of life ending. They don't really understand what it is. They just know they don't want it.
Kai, you mentioned that 25% of people said that they wouldn't want to do this for religious reasons, and that seems almost, when I think I heard you say this on one of the other podcasts you did, or one of the other shows you went on, and I first heard this, I thought, this is unbelievable. Like, I for religious reasons, for a pet, that just doesn't compute for me. It doesn't fit my intuition about humans in the world. Could it just be that saying that you don't want to do it for religious reasons sounds a lot? I mean, it's if some person was surveying me, or a pollster, or somebody was asking me, and I didn't really want to, because let's say I'm just not that attached to my cat or dog, or I just, it's an animal, whatever, I'll just get another one. But I don't want to say that, because that sounds horrible. So what I'm going to say is, well, you see, it's deep, important religious reasons. You see why I couldn't do this.
Right.
It's a much more socially desirable, maybe even easier to admit that, to say that to themselves, because they don't want to admit that they just don't care, about the animal, or just don't have enough of a care to spend the money.
I think that's very it's very possible, at least for a portion. I hope it's a bigger portion, because that means that it's not so many religious people who are against it, right? But yeah, I think that's entirely possible. I think a lot of people, if they didn't necessarily mention religion, they mention that it's like against nature, right? Whatever that means to them, whether that's a religious thing, whether it's just, and of course, I mean, we've been going against nature for a very, very long time. And if we didn't, we would have gone extinct long ago. So
sounds like religion under some other name. So yeah.
Yeah. It all kind of ties into the same stuff. But yeah, no, I mean, I think that is possible. But at the end of the day, it is a fairly small, it's just a quarter of people who are more against it. And I think we can win over a substantial amount of those people. But if not, I mean, there's a huge other pool of people to work with. So no worries.
So let me ask you a couple more objections that might come from sort of an investor. One objection might be, Kai, you don't have any experience running a vet hospital. And presumably the margins for a vet hospital aren't massive, right? And then people aren't clamoring to start vet hospitals and vet clinics. So that's a risk, and it's not a straight, I mean, maybe it's a more straightforward business than a human hospital or a clinic, but it's still not super trivial. So how are you de-risking this? In other words, why won't you fail at the vet hospital portion of this business, which would be a shame because it would potentially cause the collapse of the whole thing?
Yeah. I'm not expecting the veterinary hospital to make up any great amount of our revenue at all. If I was, then we wouldn't be doing this as a venture-backed company, right? When you're going venture-backed, you're going for like very, very large, multi-billion-dollar company. If you're just looking to start a big vet hospital, then VCs aren't interested in that, right? So you would get money a different way. So yeah, I mean, the vet hospital is really just that mechanism to help us prove that point and to offer that legitimacy and all that. Vet hospitals in general are like pretty easy to make. They're not trivial, of course, but you can start a veterinary hospital with even less than $1 million, as far as everything from end to end, all the equipment you need, the building, everything. You can do it for pretty cheap. At the same time, when it comes to local businesses, and without sounding like too much of an asshole, I mean, most of these people just don't really know what they're doing, especially in like not a huge city. I mean, Salt Lake City is, it has a decent population, but I'm not here in New York, right? A lot of these small businesses are just run by what's a word that's not mean? It's just people
Mom and pop operations kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's not people who like have experience competing in tech at like a high level and with marketing. And I mean, I could destroy all their SEO in like 2 weeks, right? Like it's just, these people don't really have the experience of competing at that level. I'm not in the business of like, even, and if it happens, it happens, but I'm not trying to like take over every veterinary hospital in Utah and like steal all their customers. I'd like to partner with them and have them do Cryonics, right? Yeah, I think it's not going to be, running a vet hospital isn't going to be the biggest challenge I ever faced, right? So I guess we can just put it that way. And I think one of the positives is that even though the revenue is not something that I'm expecting that much, in fact, I'm expecting no profit from it, because it's just like, it's not something that I'm counting on in any way. But if it slows our burn, that's fantastic, right? Because at the end of the day, our doctors who are doing this are the veterinary doctors who are also performing the cryopreservation. So if the procedures can pay for itself and slow our burn and maybe even get us profitable early on, because we have the same employees for both sort of halves of the facility, then that's fantastic. And if we can not be burning at least as much money, then really that's what is de-risking it, right? So yeah.
And that makes sense. And I'm sure you'll also find the right person to sort of head up the medical side of the vet hospital and all that you'll have in place at the right moment. Let me ask another sort of investor related objection, which is that, and you hear this for almost any company. Okay, let's say what you're doing really, it works. You start scaling, you're doing well, people are hearing about this, and it attracts attention from other players, and they say, we can do this cryopet thing easily. Let's just copy and paste. Let's just take the best practices in the business, and we'll we'll throw some money at it, we'll replicate this in 12 other places around the country before Kai has any chance to catch up, because he's just not going to be as heavily funded as we are, or whatever. In other words, what's your moat? What's going to stop others from coming in and eating your lunch here? Granted, if that happens, that's in a way great for the cryonics industry. Hey, we've all won, right? Yeah.
Right.
But from a from your specifically your investors' perspective, how would you respond to that?
Yeah, so I mean that's one of the one of the great things about building a deep tech company is you have a lot of time to build that moat. So by the time that you mentioned this starts getting attention from people and we're scaling, we already have, at that point, we would already have these standardized procedures that are already developed and are being used actively. One thing that's worth mentioning in the cryonics industry is you can't just Google, hey, or look up a YouTube video like, hey, how do I cryopreserve a cat or a human? Like, I'm talking like the actual procedure, when it comes down to the nitty gritty. These things aren't just laying around. There's a lot that goes. There's a lot of people you have to meet and a lot of conversations you have to have, and you really have to get deep into the industry to start sort of standing on the shoulders of the people who were here previously, right? Which takes time. So that's part of it. It's the fact that if we're already scaling, we would have these partnerships with these animal hospitals where obviously there'd be a non-compete clause. Anyone that signs on with Cryopets would not be able to partner with any other cryonics facility even before any others exist, right? If more people started getting in the space, competition is fantastic. It just makes us all better. If we can reach more pets, that's great. If this becomes a standard, if cryonics were to become like a standard option for people following death, then whatever cryonic facility is the leader there, or even the sub ones, they'd be some of the biggest companies in the entire world, right? So there would be plenty of market share to go around if that were the case. I invite competition. I would love it. As I've said before, I don't consider there to be any competition right now. In the future, I invite it. But when that comes, we would already be years in, and we would already have a considerable amount of money raised. And I would be very surprised if another startup would be able to catch up on that moat. And of course, when it comes to like large companies, if like Google decides, hey, I want a cryonics facility, those large corporations can't do anything. They're complete morons. They can't ship products as fast as startups can, right? There's too much friction. And that's why Google hasn't shipped a product since, I don't know, it's been a while. So it's, you never really have to be worried about large corporations as a startup. It's kind of like it's kind of a joke, but smaller startups, I think we would have such a moat that it would be hard for them to catch up.
Kai is not afraid of mom and pop shops. He will destroy their SEO and large organizations.
Yeah.
Can't touch him. Nobody can touch him.
Hey, that's the only way to do this. It's a difficult problem. This is like, I'm not going into this with, just like overly cocky, like, hey, this is going to be easy. But there is like a certain level of confidence that you have to do, or that you have to just take on like a really, really difficult problem like this. And I am confident that I can put the pieces together. And luckily there's so many people in the industry that are helping me do that. Like it's I think out of any industry that I've sort of like met people in and talked to everyone in, like cryonics has been one of my favorites. It's just a bunch of people who don't want to die. Like there's not as many like weird ulterior motives or people who are just in it for the money, because like it's just such a difficult thing to do. But no, we got to get it done. I welcome all competition. I would not want to compete against me, but by all means, anyone, feel free.
And Kai, how do you respond to there's a lot of people who I've heard from who are cryonicists with any of the cryonics companies, and when they hear about pet cryonics, I feel that I think this is maybe some people at Alcor as well, but they kind of snicker they kind of say, oh, you know, pets, haha, that's kind of a joke. That's not really, you know, nobody really cares about that stuff. It's not going to work. What would you say? What would you say to them? Like, obviously, maybe it's not fully obvious. To me, it seems pretty obvious that Alcor is, as we mentioned, kind of hiding the fact that they do pet cryonics or not being very public about it. And I've heard that the reason is because they think it's going to make them a laughingstock, or it's going to make them sound more like it's a scam or something. So do you worry at all about that, or how do you respond to that?
Yeah, no, because I've heard some of the same stuff from those organizations. They really just don't take it seriously. I think it's a lot of things. I think there's a lot of older people at those organizations where are kind of set in their ways. I mean, I think over time people have gotten more and more attached to their pets, especially like millennials and younger. Pets have really started to become part of people's families. In a lot of ways, they even like replace the people are having pets instead of having kids, right? It's not like the weird portion of like crazy cat ladies who love their animals and that's it. Like it's the vast majority of the United States that considers their pet like a real true part of their family. So it's not, I think it is part of just them being kind of outdated on what that market really looks like. At the same time, in a lot of cases, like scientists will go as far as you let them. In all other fields, you have to start with model organisms. You have to start with animals. In cryonics, that wasn't the case because the body is legally dead and you can avoid a lot of those problems. So in cryonics, people just went straight to humans, right? They're like, oh, you're going to let us do this? Then fantastic. We're going to go as far as you let us, which I think was just, a mistake. And I think we went to humans too fast. We're too big. And I think it's going to take just a bit more on the science end to get there, but plus just the logistical problems too. But yeah, I think it's part ignorance, just part being set in their ways because they went straight to humans. And yeah, I'm not sure anyone there is like very serious about their pets, or I think it's one of those things where like great startup ideas always look obvious in hindsight. They always do. You look back and you're like, why the hell wasn't someone doing that? Right? Like that seems like such an obvious route. And I believe like pet cryopreservation will look that obvious in 5 years, 10 years. They'll be like, oh, of course, this was the way to do it. That's what I believe. But at the end of the day, I'm testing a theory here. It works or it doesn't. But yeah.
Now I want to tack on one last kind of ethical question to the end of this. It's kind of weird, but I'm curious how you'll answer it. Once you're up and running and cryopreservation is readily available for someone's pet, would you say it's unethical to not cryopreserve your pet if you can afford it, if it's available? Is that unethical?
If you can afford it and it's yeah, I mean, I think the question can probably get a little complicated, but if you can afford it and you can and that's something that's not going to impact you or like your children's or your wife's life and like whatever in like a really negative way, then I think absolutely. I think there is an obligation there to try to save your pet, because at the end of the day, it's the same as like if your pet has some sort of intestinal blockage and they're going to die in 5 days unless you get them to the vet, and you're just like, nah, they've had a good life. I think that's unethical if you can afford it and you can do that for them. So yeah, I think maybe it's a bit of a spicier thing, but I think absolutely, like once the education is out there that this is an option, and you have that education and you have the ability to do it, then I think you do have an obligation to we have an obligation to try to save our animals, our children, everyone around us. I think there's always an obligation there to try to save people's lives and animals' lives. So yeah, I think so.
So I have to agree.
let me give you a hypothetical, Kai. Let's say it's 10 years from now, and unfortunately, Cryopets failed at some point between tomorrow and 10 years from now. Now, if you can, let's say we live in that universe. If you can tell me the specific reason why it failed today, then I will give you $100 in 10 years' time. How about that?
Well, good deal. I'll be looking for that $100.
Hopefully I don't have to give you that $100 because it didn't fail.
Yeah,
but if it did, let's see if you got it right.
Yeah, if it did, then I died. In those 10 years. So,
who am I going to give the $100 to? You need to give me what's your next of kin or something.
You can leave it next to my doer or something. I'll get it when I'm back. It's one of those things where like even bad startup ideas can succeed because everyone knows that execution matters a lot more than ideas. And I am someone who executes. If something is not working, I will adapt. It's I like I understand like this is life or death for me, for my parents, for my cat. My cat is like 5 years or so, like I'm just not gonna let this not work. So it would truly take like I would have to die for this to not work. And anything else would greatly surprise me.
I had a startup about 11 years ago called Blue Seed, which was trying to do some big, incredible things. In fact, there's a little portrait to one of our renderings from the old days of it. It was a sea-setting company.
Nice. I
consider the first real sea-setting company. But I basically said the same thing. I mean, I would have to die for this thing to not succeed. Sure. And it still didn't succeed. I mean, hopefully something does succeed, right? And I'm still here. So I will say there might come a point when and I hope this doesn't happen, might come a point when you feel like you've tried absolutely everything and you still can't get the thing to work. But do remember that there may be other routes or possibilities or directions outside of Cryopets. And you've sold me on this conversation so far that this is a really good idea. And, we should be, the whole Cryonics community should be helping you out here and behind this. So you got me on this point. But if for some reason it doesn't work, it's not, don't go into the door just yet. There might be other opportunities.
Right.
You are a young man, Kai, so that there's a lot out there still to try before saying I failed at changing the future, which I think is what we all ultimately want to do. Create that future where we can live indefinitely. So right now feels like Cryopets is the right way to do it. And it very well maybe. You've convinced me that it's certainly worth a good shot. But if it turns out not to be, there may be others. So I will say that much.
Well, it comes down to, a lot of startups are timing. A lot of it is luck. You can put as many things in place as you possibly can. Sometimes things do not line up, right? Yeah, at the end of the day, I'm very much a realist. I like taking very realistic approaches. The goal is ultimate immortality eventually, right? There's different ways that we chip away at that. And it's part of the reason that I waited 10 years to really start on the first project for it. And even doing the first project, I'm not going straight to humans, right? I think there's, it's a big part of it's timing. It's making sure that I go in in a niche, in something that isn't, not biting off more than I can chew, something that's just very, very achievable, and de-risking it in every way that I possibly can. And raising venture capital, but I can also self-fund a great portion of it. So it would really take, I think it would take a lot for it to not work, but I will tell. I'm going to do everything humanly possible. And I suppose that's, I'm going to give everything I can. So
sorry, Max, your sage wisdom has been rebuffed.
I don't think so. We'll but hopefully it doesn't have to come into play. I do hope this changes everything in the Cryonics industry.
As not to end on a topic of failure, I want to take the opposite approach to Max's scenario there, and ask you to again kind of go into the hypothetical. If Cryopets is wildly successful, what does it look like in 10, 20 years? So I'm a reporter in 2032, and so Kai, you have brought to fruition the most successful cryonics company in the history of the industry. Looking back, what milestones do you think contributed to your success? Obviously, aside from your appearance on the Cryonics Underground podcast in 2022.
That was the big one. Yeah, I think as a founder, you're always kind of like venture-backed companies, you're always thinking in your mind, like, okay, what do I have to prove to get to the next milestone, so that I can raise the next round and continue building this company, right? The big one first is proving the market. We've done the market research, but we have to prove that we can convert those people in our sort of initial setting, the hybrid facility. That would be the first big milestone. The second big milestone would be raising a growth round and starting to get it into those first 50 veterinary hospitals, right? I really think the main thing, which I think I mentioned a little earlier, is that inflection point of, it's just that little switch that flips in people's heads eventually when it's in enough veterinary hospitals, where people will stop going to the hospitals that don't have these procedures. I think that is going to be the ultimate thing that changes the entire industry, because at that point, everyone says, okay, I got to get these procedures in my facility now because people, all my customers are leaving and going to my competitor, right? It becomes like a standard thing that you need. It's like, yeah, I mean, it would be like going to a veterinary hospital that I can't even describe something like you can't even compare it to like a procedure missing or something, because it's so much more than that. It is a necessary fallback that has to be there for every procedure. It's sort of this missing component that when that switch flips in people's heads, every single veterinary hospital in the US is going to try to become a partner and become, try to offer these procedures. And if we're talking about, 10 plus years, maybe at that point we're starting to work with humans and doing the same in human hospitals. Time will tell how long that takes, but yeah, I really think that's the key moment. I think that drowns out everything else, every other micro decision. I think it is that moment when people will really only go to hospitals that have those procedures in place, because yeah, then it'll be in every hospital in the country pretty quickly. I mean, that's just how the free market works. They have to compete. They have to get people to come back to their hospital over the other one. So they're going to have to add the procedure, and yeah, that'll be it. Then it doesn't matter if you have a heart attack in the middle of the street, there's a hospital 5 minutes away and they do cryopreservation, and you have your arrangements made. I mean, that is the future that I want to live in.
I'm glad we ended on that, because your enthusiasm is infectious, honestly.
So so Kai, you have been incredibly generous with your time. We want to wrap up with just a few overrated, underrated, which is a way we like to finalize these podcasts, these episodes. So so just a handful of topics. That, what do you think? Are they overrated, underrated, and maybe why? So the first one is overrated or underrated hats.
Yeah, I think hats are underrated. I don't see a lot of people with hats on.
Do you worry about that whole, like, you have to take your hat off when you come indoors or something, like the old? No,
just keep it on. Yeah, I think because then you have like hat head, and that just ruins everything. So it's just yeah, I think more people should be rocking hats.
Is it like a secret what your hair looks like under there? I feel like this is
most of the time I really don't even have the hat on. I won't take it off now because I definitely have some hat head after 3-hour podcast. But yeah, no, it's not very exciting. It's just hair.
What about
I'm not holding it or anything? So
it feels a little bit like the Aubrey de Grey version of his beard. as like a focal point of your personality?
You gotta have something iconic. You gotta have something memorable. It's like
You're saying Cryopets itself is not memorable enough? Come on, it's great.
not quite. You need the hat. You need something. I would have the Aubrey de Grey beard if I could grow it. I hope I can sometime. My uncle's got it down to his thighs. So
you got the hair though. You got that. That's a distinctive.
Yeah.
The blonde hair under the hat. That's you got something going that's unusual.
Exactly.
Minecraft in 2022. Are we all past the Minecraft days?
I think Minecraft is still. I think it's still underrated. I don't think there's ever been a greater game made. Just being in the Minecraft community and just knowing everyone from those days who had like the big Minecraft servers and everything, and then going on to see what they did. They all did incredible things. And the reason for that is because Minecraft is like one of the greatest launch pads for kids ever made. It teaches you how to code. It teaches you how to do sales. It teaches you how to compete. It's almost like this closed off ecosystem where you can test your skills and then bring them out to the real world. And I mean, some of those server owners, of course, there's like Hypixel, which they were making millions every month. They're one of the biggest, I think they're the biggest Minecraft server in the world right now. They ended up selling to Riot Games, which is the massive gaming company, right? Huge acquisition. And then there's the guys who made MC Pro Hosting, one of my biggest competitors back in the day, the Minecraft hosting company. And they ended up making Mixer and selling it to Microsoft. Very huge acquisition. So it's just like, you saw all these kids like me and a lot of these others who started in this kind of closed off ecosystem and then took our skills and then went on to make really big companies. And I think it's like, there was too much success for it to not be a pattern. Like so many more kids should get into that young. And I still have a realm with my friends and we go on it all the time after, 10 years plus of playing. When my parents were going through their divorce, my dad and I played a ton of Minecraft just together as something to do. And it was very, therapeutic, I think, for both of us. Yeah, just an incredible game. I don't think anything's ever come close. So.
And can we look forward to a block by block rendering of the first Cryopets facility once it's up and running?
I've started. I was messing around trying to like design it a bit in Minecraft. Got to, that's where you start, and then I'll show it to my architect, and he's like, "Okay, I'll see what I can do with this."
Yeah. Well, at some point, maybe you can take us all on the virtual tour here. Through that. Religion as a place where people can get a sense of community, meaning, purpose. Maybe not truth, but those other things.
Yeah. I would say religion. I mean, religion is so cool. That's one of the like parts of it that hurts is like the lore and obviously, I mean, there's a lot of religion that's like really gross and kind of weird, but just the stories and a lot of it is really cool. So it's kind of sad, but honestly, I think religion is mostly just predatory. I think it feeds on people who are looking for more meaning or looking for answers that they just don't have, or just trying to understand things that we don't understand yet. And I think it preys on those people. Majority of these people in religions, they pay tithing, they give money, to the religion, and it limits them on everything they can do in life. Because at the end of the day, I think religion is it's really a form of control. They take everything that people want to do, which they call sins, right? Which is like a lot of it is made up of just like stuff that people enjoy, right? And they tell them they can't do it and use that to control them. And if religion was kind of just in these small communities and it wasn't like that, then I think that would be fine. But the fact that like 90% of the world or something is religious, that's very overrated. I think that over time that should probably stop. It's a little much.
Your statement reminds me a little bit of Christopher Hitchens with religion poisons everything or such. One of the four horsemen. Although I don't think you would take it quite that far, but I think certainly you feel like we the world can do with less of it.
It fills a void. Even, civilizations that have been completely cut off from the rest of humanity still develop some sort of religion, right? It's something that's just naturally in us because we're the only animals that understand that we're going to die and need answers on what that means. So we create fantasies. So I think once we solve the death problem, ultimately it'll fade away, probably completely eventually, because that void won't be there anymore.
Kai, you've been, like I said, incredibly generous with your time. Let's end with one final question, which is, and if you're not comfortable answering this, we can even excise it from the final cut here. But Kai Micah Mills, is that your real name, or is this like a witness protection program kind of thing?
Yeah, it is my real name. It's my legal name. I actually grew up Kai Rowan, Kai Micah Rowan. Micah is my middle name, because my father, when he was young, his stepdad adopted him and changed his last name to Rowan. And after we moved to Utah and we talked about it for a bit, we both decided that we wanted to go back to the blood last name instead of the step family. So we both changed our names back to Mills at the same time, back when I was younger. So yeah, Kai Micah Mills, that's the one.
I lose this bet. I for sure thought it's a really cool name. So
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Put it alongside the hat and the hair for the total package.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, Kai, thank you for going through this for a few hours with us. We wish you the best of success. Obviously, your success is the success of potentially countless billions, right? So, we hope you make it there. And if so, you will have appeared early on here at the Cryonics Underground podcast. So we will have that.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure, and hopefully we can do it again when I have the facility up, or maybe you guys can visit and we can do one live in the facility or something. I think that'd be fun. So
we'd love to. We'll be there. Hope all of us will be there as long as it just means she's getting only a checkup that day. Nothing more serious than that. No,
exactly.
Not at all. All right. Thanks, Kai. Thanks for joining us. Okay, Kai has left our Zoom studio. Thank you, everybody, for being here with us. I'm sure if you were following along, though, you didn't need anything to keep you around. That was an awesome few hours. I want to say that overall, I was impressed. I was impressed with his approach. I can imagine people saying who don't know him or haven't heard this interview or such, that this conversation, that he was that he's young, he maybe doesn't have the right experience yet, or he doesn't know how to run this kind of operation. But honestly, he struck me as kind of having the right balance of chutzpah and humility. He's I think he's going to go far, and I wasn't kidding when I said that I think he's likely to change cryonics a lot in the coming years. First for pets, and then ultimately for humans. So even if you don't own pets, you don't care about pets, you don't think pets are a thing that should matter, and my cat hopefully isn't too aware of what I'm saying here, it's still going to have a big impact on the cryonics industry and on human cryonics. And of course, if you think that about pets, you're missing out, as pets are a wonderful thing to have in our lives. And I think Kai is going to show the industry that they've been wrong to ignore or downplay the pet cryonics portion of what we're trying to do. So pet cryonics should not have been an afterthought, and I think soon enough it will no longer be an afterthought. What do you think, Daniel?
Yeah, I have to kind of echo those sentiments. When I first heard about cryopets, my initial reaction was something along the lines of, that's great. Anything happening in the cryonic space is better than nothing happening at all. But once I said that to myself, my next thought that kind of jumped into my head was, I guess, rather judgmental. It was something along the lines of, why pet cryopreservation and not something else with human cryopreservation? I love cats and dogs as much as the next person, but what about my grandma? What about me? But after that conversation with Kai, which was great, I had a absolute blast. I can honestly say I am walking away with it with a much fuller understanding of just exactly what he's trying to do with cryopets and maybe even beyond. And also much more overall enthusiastic outlook on what he's trying to do here as well. So I think it was a big win, and I really enjoyed it.
Well, I'm glad we're on the same page. And I'm sure many of our listeners are now on the same page as well. As for us here, that's going to wrap it up. As always, you can find links and more information. There's at least a couple of things that Kai mentioned during the conversation that we're going to be linking to below. Yeah, we will look forward to seeing you all, now actually seeing you all, rather than just you get to hear us, you get to see us on the next one. Bye-bye.